evening and welcome to the June 20th, 2018 meeting of the Gaithersburg Planning Commission. First up is the approval of our minutes from June 6th, 2018. Is there a motion, please?
I move that we approve the minutes from the June 26th meeting.
Second.
June 6th. June 6th, I'm sorry. Today's.
All right. Is there a second?
Still seconded.
All right.
Okay.
It's moved and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously. All right, next is our site plan agenda, and we have a busy one tonight. First up is AFP-7921-2018, 850 Still Creek Lane, a new accessory dwelling unit above an existing garage in the MXD zone, and this is an amendment to the final site plan. And presenting from staff is Ray Rooks. Good evening, Ray.
Good evening, Planning Commission. There we go. Staff is before you to introduce application AFP 7921, 2018. The applicant is requesting an amendment to final site plan. The subject property is located at 850 Still Creek Lane, is located within the Lakeland subdivision, and is zoned MXD mixed-use development. The amendment includes the addition of an accessory dwelling unit above the existing garage and associated architecture changes. Here tonight to present the application and answer questions is the property owner, Eric Siebert.
Good evening.
Good evening, Planning Commissioners, and thank you for seeing me. First, I want to say Ray has been great to work with, and I appreciate his assistance during this process. Yes.
Plus, he wears bow ties.
Yeah, I know. I saw him. I'm like, oh, you didn't tell me about that part of it. My name is Eric Siebert, as he said, and my wife and I reside at 850 Still Creek Lane. We've lived in the Lakelands since 2009. It took a little adjustment to understand the concept of new urbanism. But immediately we became enamored with our house, our street, and our community. We have great neighbors in front of us and to the side of our house, and we also abut our back of our house is Muddy Branch Creek. We took on this project because we have an adult son with a disability. He and his wife rent in the Lakelands currently in a detached urban cottage. Urban cottage is the terminology in your verbiage. We felt we could support him better by having them closer. An attached cottage allows them a similar independence that they currently have, but it also gives us the same independence by having it separate from our main house. We looked at another option. Is essentially we could have bought another house, looked for another house with an apartment, but we decided we love where we live. And we thought this was a good option, and it was also appropriate for the street and the community. I can't say I was totally thinking out of the box with the way the structure is being conceived, because just down the few houses down, a similar house had extended their garage vertically, and so it was similar to what we're doing. So I got the idea from them, and I just kind of, let's say, tweaked it a little bit. Additionally, on Still Creek, the builder NV offered options to upgrade and expand above the garage. They did a little bit differently with a 12-on-12 pitch, and but it was part of the main house. So it's not unusual. I would guess about half the houses have that style of that option that they took. So people are used to having something above the garage on our street. And in the Lakelands generally. In order to get to this point, I had to present to the Design Review Committee of Lakelands and get their approval. Because there's not a lot of additions and expansions going on in the Lakelands, it took, and most of the members weren't familiar, hadn't seen something like this. It took 2 meetings to work out all the little details that you'll see on the plans that you have in front of you. Now a few details about the project. Directly. When completed, the garage that we have will still remain the garage. What we're doing is ripping off the roof and expanding upward. Essentially, it's a prefabbed roof system, and we're just going to rip that off and then go vertically one level. And then what we're doing is in the back, where the slope of the roof is going to remain flat so that we have a loft space up inside. The way you access it is you would be going to the driveway and to the left. You would go around the left side of the garage, and immediately when you turned, there would be the stairs that traverse up to the first level, the main level of the apartment, which is really the second floor of our main house. From there, so some of the features of the apartment, I'm going to call it an apartment as opposed to an urban cottage. It has a kitchen, it has a bathroom. The loft space has an enclosed bedroom and an open area that can be used as an office or whatever. We also have in there a door that leads to the main house that will be lockable from both sides. There'll be times where we want to kind of interact with, especially our son and everything, where we don't want to have them go around and go to the front door. So that's some of the features inside. With regards to the exterior, the materials are consistent with the existing house, except for a few subtle differences. We've pretty much used the same windows, everything's white, shutters, kind of the spacing of the windows. One of the things that we got into a lot of discussion during the DRC meeting was the three windows. The garage doors in my particular, it's called an Abernathy, the garage doors are offset to the wall. Yeah. And the question was, do the windows get set to the center of the wall, or do they get set to the center of the garage doors? And so that became an interesting conversation. Of course, with my thinking, I was the reverse of what everyone else decided.
Oh, so there's more than
I went to the wall, and they preferred to go to the doors. And that's what you see right there is to the doors. I was very happy to comply with that request. The dormer brought up some questions also. The purpose of the dormer is because we have that loft, is to drive some sunlight, natural light, to the back of the loft, but also there's that open, it's almost like a two-story area, and to really provide some indirect natural light to that main living area.
That's nice.
So there was questions about that, and then we also talked about what I'll call the grills or the muttons. Do we have them or not? Originally, I submitted them without them. I think we talked about it and did it, and I think it looks, let's say, more appropriate for the other houses that have that option that NV provided with having the muttons in the window. So pretty much that's the basis of design. The walkway that we have is a stone paver walkway that's already there. It's ready to receive the stairway, as you can see on the site plan Ray showing. So you'll go around to the left. That walkway also continues to our deck. So we'll actually walk underneath the intermediate landing and still access our deck. I'm trying to think if there's anything. One of the things about the construction, the apartment will exceed code for energy efficiency and for one of my pet peeves, sound requirements. I'm in multifamily. I've built a lot of multifamily residences, and I'm very passionate about sound above and beyond the code. And so I'm going to apply all the things I've learned to this house, this dwelling also. And that's it. Can I open up to any questions?
Great, thank you.
Very thorough.
Anybody have questions?
My only question to staff is there any requirements for fencing around during the construction period for mitigating any kind of accidents from children coming around, so on and so forth?
We haven't put that in on the planning side, but I don't know if the building code and building reviewers would do that or not.
Okay.
Any other questions?
It's not a bad idea, though, and I think I'd commit to that. So.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah. All right, is there anyone in the audience that would like to comment on this application? All right, seeing no one. Ray, you want to do the wrap-up, please?
Sure. Before we get to that, staff needs to note that we discovered at least one notification postcard did not print on both sides. One side was blank. Typically on the front of these postcards is the address of the person whom we sent it to, and on the rear is a summary. The summary was left off of at least one. We don't know why. We just discovered it. Someone came in and said, I got a blank postcard, what's up? We had we are confident that a majority of the postcards that we sent out were correctly printed, but it's hard to know exactly how many were blank. With that said, staff is of the opinion that appropriate notification still has been observed because the property owner of the subject property has spoken to immediate neighbors and has had a sign posted.
It was posted, right? So
for the appropriate amount of time. Okay. So if you feel that's an issue, we can keep the record open and send postcards out again. But we don't feel
just
necessary.
As a technicality, there's an appeal period for how long?
17 days.
17 days. So there's always recourse if somebody didn't get notice but wants to say something, I suppose, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is that fair?
Yes.
I don't think we need to interrupt the process
Not at all, not on a residential street,
No.
not at this density, I think, with signage.
Good.
that
All right.
fulfills
Okay.
the requirement.
All right, so what do you think? Oh, go ahead.
Do you want me to
You need a
read it some?
recommendation.
You gotta let
You
me
used
read
up
my
all your
part.
time. You have to reset the clock.
Staff recommends that the planning commission, based on the exhibits submitted and the staff report findings and recommendations, grant AFP 7921, 2018 amendment to final site plan, finding it in compliance with section 24-170 and 24-171 of the city code with 0 conditions.
Excellent, thank you. All right.
It's not a question, I just have a recommendation. I noticed that the unit cantilevers over the garage, 2 feet, and then you're adding, you're adding an awning, a metal frame
Still
awning.
no roof, yeah.
Yes, to that, that's another 4 feet. Personally, I think that that depth might be aesthetically just off. My recommendation would be take the metal roof off of that and then put brackets that basically carry out the tectonics of the structure in a way that it doesn't seem so top heavy. I think if you add more depth with that roof, while adding that detail, you're going to make the depth rather uncomfortable and too top heavy. So I would just, you have the room in both sides of your garage to potentially add an architectural bracket that would carry or enable the language of the architecture not to feel so overpowering.
So is there, so that's a recommendation, not a condition or anything? And
No, it's just my recommendation.
Is there anything that staff might need in order, if he does want to change that, that detail, that would be allowed under approval tonight?
Yeah, I think that before we sign off on the plans, he could, if he chooses to, he could change it.
Okay, if he chooses to.
And
that could
again,
be
it's just a
handled by-
recommendation.
That could be handled by staff.
Yes.
Yeah.
We don't need a condition tonight.
I don't think so. Good
That's
observation.
great. I would note that while you wrestled with the mutton patterns in the windows, they're identical to the existing house, so you're really bringing the same windows over, which I think is
Makes some sense.
the right answer, yeah.
Yep.
Looks great.
I just thank you for bringing up mutton because Matt loves the word mutton. He
Yeah.
loves to say it.
I love mutton.
He likes mutton, period.
Love mutton on the bone.
Yeah, right.
Every bit of it, yeah.
That's why I say grills.
It's all related. Yeah, it's all related.
This has gotten off track.
No,
It's not-
sorry.
it's not- it's not-
Lost control, boss.
I know, sorry. What have I done? All right, any other comments on the
No,
application?
looks great.
I think it's gonna fit harmoniously. And that's always what I'm looking at. And to the community, I don't think it's gonna be any impact to the community. I think it's gonna be it looks great, so.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Scale with the neighborhood, scale with the existing home,
Mhm.
and there's
Right.
precedence for this
Right.
addition. It's a
Right.
great zoning and planning piece, we're
Right.
actually adding density without adding physical density,
And
which I think
it's
is great.
serving a family purpose, which is super. Yeah.
Great comments. All right, if there's nothing else, is there a motion, please?
Mr. Chairman, I move that based on the exhibits submitted and the staff report findings and recommendations, move that the planning commission grant AFP 7921-2018 amendment to final site plan finding in compliance with sections 24-170 and 24-171 of the city code with 0 conditions.
Second.
It's moved and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously. Thanks very much. Good
Good
luck.
luck.
And just to remind you, the comments about the brackets and maybe studying the overhang, that's something you can do kind of on your own pace with
Yep.
staff, and that won't need to come back for any official approval. So,
I've been thinking about that.
okay,
So
I
thank
think
you.
4 feet
Yeah.
is a little too deep, but.
Okay.
very good. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Send you email.
All right, next up is AFP-7929-2018 Gateway Center at 831 Russell Avenue. A 17-space parking waiver request, and it's located in the C2 General Commercial Zone. And this is an amendment to final site plan. Presenting from staff is Caroline Seiden. Good evening, Caroline.
Good evening.
Usually you're doing Board of Appeals, so tonight.
Yeah, a little of everything. This is an application, AFP 7929-2018, for a 17-space parking waiver at 831 Russell Avenue, which is also known as the Gateway Center, and it is highlighted here in blue. It's two separate buildings located on Russell between, it's just off of the map, Montgomery Village and to the south, and Christopher Avenue to the north. The applicant, we're here because the parking waiver is more than 10%. If some of you may recall, when we redid the parking ordinance a few years ago, staff is now permitted to grant parking waivers of up to 10% of the required parking. This parking waiver request is for 16%, so it requires planning commission approval. The applicant, Kelly Crow, is here, and Robin Menge is the architect, and I will turn it over to them.
Great, thank you, good evening.
Thank you for your time. Good evening. And Carolyn has been incredibly helpful throughout this process, and I think 2 thumbs up. So the owners of the property are seeking the parking waiver due to the infeasibility of complying with the parking requirements. In 2014, Finmark Management purchased the properties from First Potomac Management, and it's indicated as Lot 2 on the Gateway Center site plan. And it's 2 commercial office buildings, or 2 commercial buildings. One is a mixed-use building made up of office and retail, and the other is currently a retail building. When the properties were purchased, the owner was advised that the parking areas of these 2 buildings were shared with the hotel that's behind it, and that the shared parking would be for everybody to use. And as it turns out, the paperwork to make that so was not filed or recorded, and so the owners are now left with the 2 buildings and the parking that exists. And we've done a parking study. There is no available space to add any more parking spaces. We did a shared parking calculation and came up with 17 spaces shy.
So not to interrupt, I apologize for interrupting, but just to be clear, what's precipitating the application now? Was there work being done that just finally came to a change?
So there's a prospective tenant coming into 831 Russell Avenue, and the prospective use group of that tenant is a change in use from what is currently there. And so we were doing a little bit of due diligence in advance of that, just to see if we could actually make that happen. And so we did the parking study with that anticipated user in that building.
Yeah. Okay.
And so we came up with the 17 spaces short. We did a full analysis, went through all of the criteria for the review. It is on bus transit routes, so there that is that capability. There's some retail space in there that has different uses. There's a small restaurant in 811 Russell Avenue that is accessed a lot by foot because from the area businesses, so they're not driving to this location. So there's a little bit of variation in how the spaces are actually used and how they're parked versus the code compliance of the parking. There's a community center in the back that's a religious community center, and that's mostly on the weekends and not even very well parked, as many as can fit in the space based on the square footage. So based on all of this, it's our feeling that the 17 spot shortage won't compromise any of the people that are going to be there using the space.
I know there isn't a formal agreement, but is anybody enforcing exclusive parking on the adjacent lots? That would preclude people from parking there?
In the hotel behind?
Wherever you might have some overflow parking.
That's really the only place that is the overflow is the hotel, because it's kind of
so
landlocked.
Are they enforcing exclusive parking on their site? Are they?
I don't believe so.
I don't think so.
Yeah, they don't have any signs that say parking only for hotel or other subject to tow
If
or anything
towed, call.
like that. Yeah,
I
that would be
think-
an issue.
I think I can't remember. I think they might in the front there, but not that side lot that's in back of our
Yeah.
building.
And actually, quite frankly, sometimes people from the hotel
Park in our lot
park
as well.
in these lots because it's closer to the front door.
Yeah, and this is really just an anecdotal thing. I know you didn't get a formal agreement, so we really don't want to hinge this. But as a practical matter, there hasn't been a practice of people sort of an aggressive exclusive parking condition that would cause a problem. If somebody inadvertently parked on the wrong side of the median, whatever it was.
Right. I think there's also been some discussion of the hotel making some modifications to their facility. I don't know how far they've gotten, which would then
And what does
compromise some of the
17
parking.
spaces represent as a percentage?
16%.
16%, so, okay.
And just for the record, staff's comments are that there's been no incidents.
Right, yeah, they did say there's no
Without
incidents, but, I just have to ask, so, has there been an attempt to establish a legal agreement? I mean, or
So-
some sort of agreement,
So
some
we
legal,
reached
something in
out-
writing?
So we had reached out to the hotel several months back.
Okay.
And this is something, I mean, I've been involved with this property since, I want to call it 2003, 2004, when the previous owner, First Potomac, had the property. And now I'm with Finmark Management. And the last conversation I had with the hotel was, we could enter into a kind of month-to-month agreement with you all, but our overall idea for going forward with the hotel is they may want to expand on their existing footprint of the hotel, so they could no longer do
Accommodate.
anything further than a
Yeah.
month-to-month agreement with us, because they'd have to revoke it. And with the tenant in tow, it's a long-term tenant. We're looking at roughly a 10-year term for this tenant. We wouldn't be able to park
Fair
the
enough.
use.
Okay.
So Caroline, in the change of use scenario, are let me put it this way, are all 17 spaces due to the change of use, or was there already a deficit?
So they've essentially been operating with what I would call a temporary 16-space parking waiver since the first site plan was approved.
Right.
Because that was, when the property was first developed, it was developed with a condition that they go after this parking agreement, but in the meantime, they would grant this waiver. Because the parking agreement was never reached, it's essentially operated with that lack of parking
Without a problem,
since 1996.
Yeah,
We just thought with the change of use
Yeah, it is.
coming, that it would be better to make this a permanent parking waiver than to continue to keep it temporary and keep asking for something that they're not getting.
But, I mean, I see that we have the parking, I guess observation here, but are we sure that there's no, what about the impact? I'm just concerned about the future impact that this may have. I mean, with this use, I'm not sure, you know what the use is gonna be, but how will that, I mean, we don't know how that's gonna impact parking. Is there any, thought about that?
Yeah, so the parking, the user that's coming in, even though the building has about 12,000 square feet, if we just divided that by occupancy for that use,
Right.
it's actually not going to be having that many occupants because of the equipment that's going to be in there permanently that's going to be taking up space.
Okay.
And because of safety issues, there's going to be limited number of children that can attend each activity. So there
Okay.
will be a limited number of people that are in the building at one time, as well as
Okay.
staff. And then the times that it's going to be utilized is mostly in the evening and on the weekends.
Okay.
So
Okay.
it's
All right,
in-
I mean-
not in direct conflict with the office users and even some of the daytime retail users.
Those
off hours.
extenuating circumstances, I mean, we just don't wanna create a situation going forward, you
Yeah.
know?
Nor do we as the owner.
Yeah.
I'm a former tenant of 811 Russell Avenue
Mhm.
in an office, and having been there 7 days a week, day and night, as a business owner, I've seen what the parking lot does at all times of day and night, and especially on the weekends when this user will be mostly used, it's empty.
Okay.
I will add that we went back historically and looked at aerials
Okay.
over the past maybe 10 years. I pulled each of them up. I don't know for sure what day of the week each of those aerials was taken, but there was never a condition where there weren't some vacant parking spaces on the site. So there were some days where it was somewhat full, but it was never completely full.
And actually, to add to that, as a tenant, it was always very full when there was an event going on at the hotel, and the hotel was parking
Sure.
in the lot,
Sure.
and I could see,
I guess the only other question on the table would be, what happens if the new use, and I know common sense is going to tell us because of the overlapping or the off-hours use by one side of the tenant base, and that it shouldn't overlap or it shouldn't create a problem, but is there any way, what is the plan B or the contingency if it does get overparked, at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, pick a time when it would be mostly full?
I don't know that that's a reality during the week. It's mostly later in the afternoon and evening.
I think the expectation is that should a problem arise, you have to figure out
What to do.
programmatically what's going on. If it's at a certain time of day, you might have to arrange for valet, you might have to arrange for stacked parking, you might have to arrange for something else.
I was
Right.
thinking
And I
about
think
valet
we as a
too.
commissioner are just saying you cannot park on the neighboring lots when there's an overflow.
Right.
Because you're creating a problem from this waiver. And, you know, the fact that it's a mixed-use chart means that, you know, we've sort of already understood that there's different uses, different times of day, different days of the week.
Right.
And that mixed-use chart already accommodates that. So not only is it, you know, and I hate asphalt, right?
Yeah,
We're all aware of that, yeah.
Right.
So, you know, so the idea that we're already reducing the parking count because of the different use times, you know, becomes if something slips, if their programming changes, there's going to have to be a programmatic response to that programmatic change, right? And
Right.
we're expecting the landowner to, you know, the property owner to
Right.
do that, whatever it is. And,
Mhm.
and your response, they wouldn't do it now because they don't really know what the programmatic
Right.
problem
Yeah.
is, right?
Yeah.
They don't know if it's a single
So
mode
I'm
drop
wondering,
off.
so I'm wondering out loud, and we have to get to the public testimony, but I'm just sort of wondering out loud, and we'll have a discussion about this. If there is a condition that can be wrapped up in this, whether it's term or it's, you know, something, I don't know what that would look like, but think on that while I ask if there's anybody in the public that would
Okay.
like to testify. Is there anyone in the public that would like to comment on this application? Okay, you didn't have much time to think then, I guess.
I mean, if you want to put a time limit on the parking waiver
And then revisit
have
it.
them revisit it
Yeah.
in a.
Yeah, I don't think we can do that with sign a 10-year lease, right? So I don't want to burden
Right,
the
and that's-
commercial, yeah,
Right,
so
yeah.
I'm not sure a time limit is, you know, you have to have a predictable, you can't sign a, you know, really expensive lease and have
Right.
a question mark, right? Which is the same reason that
But-
hotel doesn't want to make the agreement, right? Which all
In
makes sense.
in the reverse, are we enabling them to sign a lease with the problem without figuring out the issue or the consequences of them
Well,
engaging
then I think
in-
it goes to neighborhood services, right? So if there's a
Yeah.
problem,
Yes.
neighborhood services
Right.
has to enforce the
Right.
programmatic
Right.
response from the
Right.
landowner, right? So,
Right.
so the property owner has to respond to neighborhood services when they go and, you know, find them or help the neighbors tow cars or whatever the response is, you know, but it's a neighborhood services issue.
Right, right.
I wouldn't want from a zoning standpoint, to put a time limit on something that prohibits their ability to tenant.
You okay?
It's a good point. All right, well, let's do the recommendation, and we can move into discussion formally then.
Staff recommends that the planning commission, based on the exhibits submitted, the applicant's testimony, and the staff report findings and recommendation, grant a 17-space parking waiver for 811-831 Russell Avenue, AFP 7929-2018, finding it in conformance with sections 24-168, 24-172A, and 24-222A of the city code.
Okay, thanks. All right, so let me try this on a database, or based on data. In today's world, whatever observations are being made right now about how heavily parked the lot is the building 100% occupied?
That building itself or the project itself? Because right now.
Whoever would park in the lot, is it,
No, it's not 100% occupied.
okay. And with the change of use, does that put it into 100, is that your
No.
reason? Okay. And with the proposed change of use, or what you anticipate, how many additional tenants would be added to?
The entire, all the space in both buildings were calculated as part of the calculations. So
Right.
any space that has been historically office was considered office, retail is retail.
Yeah,
So
I
that's
think
also
what I'm trying to do is,
accommodated.
because the evidence presented is about existing
existing,
conditions, I'm just trying to get a
It's,
sense.
the evidence is not, well, the evidence was based on 10 years of
Multiple
looking
years,
at
yeah,
aerials.
I understand.
And,
So my point is, let's just say there's a
But the-
status quo of a lot that has 4 spaces left. I know, I'm not giving you the number. And you told me the new use is gonna add 2. It's like, sounds like a reasonable enough expectation. That's all I'm looking for, is what do you anticipate the change of use adding to the current demand? That's,
And-
it's sort of an estimate.
The change in use, the spreadsheet was actually a combination of the existing use with the new proposed use.
So
in there.
at full occupancy?
At full
Yeah, full
occupancy.
occupancy.
At full occupancy.
Yes.
But the recreation use is a lower standard than office use. So,
It's actually a higher.
Higher.
it's
higher.
250, right?
It's
No.
225.
Yeah.
220, am I looking at the old chart?
But the space that the recreation use is gonna go into would never work for an office. It
Office,
probably wouldn't be
yeah,
an office
okay.
use.
It
Yeah,
was
so-
it was retail.
It was retail.
So
Oh, it's retail, okay,
it
which would
was
be definitely much
250.
higher,
Mhm.
much higher.
Oh, so that goes down.
Yes.
So I guess,
No.
It goes up.
It goes
John's
up.
your
Goes
point,
up.
yeah, it's your point that if it changes its use back to something that's a higher use,
Right.
that
They would
we're
need
we're
less
busted
parking.
again, right? Yeah, so we just gotta
Retail, yeah.
Yeah.
It goes up.
keep on. So-
Mhm.
So it wouldn't, under the current plan, they wouldn't be able to switch it back to retail because the parking count.
That's the other way around.
It'd be easier to go
It's more-
back to retail.
Right.
It would require less parking
Right.
if it went back to
Right.
retail.
Retail requires less
Less
parking
parking.
than the
Than the rec use.
recreational use.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah, 225, I got you.
Right.
All right,
Yeah, office is 300, right?
Office is 300.
Right, okay.
okay. So maybe that's the trigger, that if it ever goes back to retail, we need to see it again.
Then,
Well, every time there's a change in use, I
It's
have
gotta
to
come
show
back
parking.
to
Has
back
to
up
be
to
shown.
us, they- right.
Any
Has a
change-
high-
Any change in use would come back
Comes
through
back to
this.
us.
But it would also, but
It is our-
that wouldn't necessarily rescind the parking waiver, though, would it?
No.
No, I mean, if
If
it
I'm not
went,
making it worse.
right, if it went from recreational back to retail, you would actually improve the
Yeah.
parking situation.
And-
No, but my point is if it went
Would you
more retail, went to
remove
more
the number of
recreational or
spaces?
something, or would, if,
Then they would
Oh.
come back to you for that.
I understand, but if that happened, would it automatically recalculate the parking or reset the waiver request? It wouldn't
I think
necessarily.
we would discuss that as
Okay.
whatever the waiver request, because they would have to get another waiver request unless, for some reason, the hotel
I mean,
cooperated.
just be perfectly blunt, 16% parking shift here doesn't really bother me. I mean, I think in the grand scheme of things, there's very few places that are parked up to, even in our mixed use, except in very isolated, very specific, short periods of time. And if you're getting overflow from other uses next door, other property owners, that's an escape valve right there, is it keep
Not
them
your
off the
fault.
lot, yeah. I mean, so I'm not that worried about it. I'm thinking more sort of systemically, whether approving this at that level just needs to have a little bit of a framework around it about what if, just as a practice more than a true hunch that there's actually a problem, or even evidence that there's a problem. Because I understand there probably isn't. That's not really my point. But this goes on forever if no change of use comes back, and that's all I'm looking for is a little bit of
Until neighborhood services gets gold.
what's that?
Until neighborhood services gets gold.
Yeah, right, until there's an impact on that.
Yeah.
Just somebody complain. Yeah.
So what I'm thinking is that based on the evidence, just to be clear, based on the evidence, I don't see that we should be that concerned about approving the waiver. Let me set this up.
Yeah,
And-
I like you,
Right.
begging the question.
Yeah, but should we at least have something in there that sets the framework for that potential problem? Just because it's a relatively high number compared to what we usually approve.
Right, yeah, and I just had one little question. There's no impact to handicap parking. No, because there was no discussion here ever about that. So there's no impact to that,
No.
right?
The
Okay.
handicap parking is appropriate.
Right. So that's okay. Just want to make
Still
sure.
writes laws stick no matter what. So before my poor little brain breaks, I want to go back over this, and I apologize. So at a ratio of 300, it's 300 square feet per car, right?
Right.
So at a ratio of 250 square feet per car, there's more cars, right?
Mhm.
So recreation is more cars than office, and retail is
Less.
less. No.
No.
That's a little bit more.
It's
accurate.
more.
So,
Whoa.
yeah, you guys keep telling me, but my little brain.
No, I
doesn't know
agree
that.
with you. I got it.
You can't just keep saying it and make it true. 225 is lower than 250.
You're correct, sorry.
So noted.
Okay, all right, thank you. All right, I'm okay again.
Got your brain back, good.
It's
so
less,
we're taking-
it's
so we're
less than
taking-
office,
so-
yes.
So it's not a big number, but you're taking a little bit of pressure off by going to this use.
Yes.
So it's even
Yeah.
better than.
It's
it
even
would have
better,
been.
right.
Yeah, okay.
And if it flips to office, it gets better.
All right, so back on track. Anybody have any issues with the proposal as it stands right now?
No.
I'll let it go and assume and know that should there be a problem, neighborhood services will step in, and there will be probably 2 or 3 different avenues for addressing it that can be handled during enforcement.
Yeah, because you do not want parking wars. I mean,
Yeah. All right. Any other discussion? Any concerns?
No. No?
Anything? All right. Is there a motion, please?
Yes. Mr. Chair, I move that the Planning Commission, based on the exhibits submitted, the applicant's testimony, the staff report, findings, and recommendations, and our discussion this evening, grant a 17-space parking waiver for 811 to 831 Russell Avenue, AFP 7929-2018, finding it in conformance with sections 24-168, 24-172A, and 24-222 sub A of the city code, with
Second.
no conditions.
Second.
It's moved in second, and all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously. Thanks very much.
Good luck.
Thank you. All right, that takes us to our next item on the site plan agenda, and that is AFP-7842-2018 at 465 North Frederick Avenue, exterior building renovations and minor site improvements from McDonald's located at 465 North Frederick Avenue in the CD Corridor Development Zone. This is an amendment to final site plan, and presenting from staff is Jasmine Forbes.
Good
Good evening, Jasmine.
So staff is for you to present amendment to final site plan application AFP-7842-2018. This application comes before the Planning Commission in accordance with section 24-172A, which requires Planning Commission to grant amendments to approve final site plans. So the applicant is requesting approval for exterior renovations and minor site improvements for the existing McDonald's building located at 465 North Frederick Avenue, which you can see on the aerial. It's located right at the corner of Frederick Avenue and Olden Hall. The plan also includes the installation of electronic message board, which we need to be reviewed and approved by Planning Commission in accordance to section 24-212I. And the applicant is also requesting a sign adjustment for 2 building signs pursuant to section 24-213AF. And I have Edward Gibbs, the attorney for McDonald's, who will introduce the presentation.
Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission. Edward Gibbs, an attorney with offices in Largo. The name of my law firm is Gibbs and Haller, and I have had the distinct pleasure to represent McDonald's since 1980.
Wow.
And,
That's a while.
that's saying a lot about how old I am today. I want to say I graduated as a young child from law school. And actually, if I'm not mistaken, I think I was here in 1998 when the
Yes,
original
sir.
site plan was approved for
Bureau
this
Drive.
site, and I do remember.
For the conversion.
I do
You and Trudy remember
So
that?
I go back a ways, and I want you to know that I live only 6 miles from here, and so I'm over in this neck of the woods all the time, dining and shopping and whatnot. So I am familiar with this restaurant and with the area generally. It has been a pleasure for me to represent McDonald's all these years, and you know, I have been personally through several iterations of their new facelifts, for lack of a better term, which have been implemented over the years. And of course, you know, the drive-through lanes and the play lands and everything else that they have done through the course of time. And this is really just another phase in their refreshment program, one that's being implemented nationally. I have had the the pleasure to represent them in numerous jurisdictions over the years, and I can assure you we are implementing this type of architectural facade change in many jurisdictions around the Washington metropolitan area. So this is not something that is unique just to Gaithersburg or Montgomery County, but it's a more contemporary look, I think, than what is seen at a lot of the McDonald's restaurants today. Other than that, they're trying to put some new signage on. We have what's called an electronic message board, but it's really just a menu board at the drive-through lane. It's not like we're going to be sending messages that people are going to be able to read from nearby roads. some minor changes to the parking lot itself, to the parking spaces. We have more spaces than are needed under the code provision. The building signage is well below the square footage, the area that's allowed on a building. I think on one of the sides, we're allowed 190 square feet, and I think we have something like 16 square feet that we're proposing. So we're well beneath the code requirements there. We don't have any buttons on the windows. If I had known that Commissioner Hopkins was so enamored with those, I would have tried to persuade McDonald's to do something about that. So I apologize for that not having occurred with this architectural change. What I would like to do, though, is introduce Mr. Joseph Sperone, the civil engineer who has been working on the site. We do have a very short PowerPoint presentation that I'd like him to take you through, and then after that, we'll be happy to answer any questions which you may have.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Joe Sperone with Dynamic Engineering. We're the civil engineers on the site. Same as Mr. Gibbs. I've been working on McDonald's basically my whole career, starting from 2000. And then the firm and one of the other partners I'm with has been working with them since 1980. So our firm has quite a long history with them as well. I think most are familiar with the location. As was mentioned, it's on North Frederick Ave at the intersection of North Frederick Ave and Odenhill Avenue. I'm going to skip through the aerials and I'm going to get right to the survey showing existing conditions, and I'll just briefly go through to give kind of a context of what we're going to be doing as far as the remodel. You got the building at the center of the site, 3,880 square feet. You've got two full movement access points, one off a common access drive to the, I'll say, northwest, and then to the southeast you have another full movement access drive off of Odenhill Avenue. Building surrounded by parking mainly around the perimeter of the site. You do have a couple of spaces directly up along the front of the building where the main access point to the building is. And then you have the drive-through, existing drive-through at the rear. A little bit of a different circulation than you might be used to seeing, where traditionally you have that counterclockwise circulation to enter the drive-through, but due to the access points being at the rear, you've got drive-through access from the rear of the property, kind of that reverse horseshoe shape at the rear of the property. And then you follow the more traditional circulation route counterclockwise around the building. Proposed conditions, this is a colored version of the site plan that was submitted. As you can see from a high level view, it's not a lot changing. A lot of landscape areas remain the same, the building's in the same location, it's not changing. This is for a remodel. A lot of the existing building is going to remain. Really, we're talking about the changes here have to do with the facade itself, so facade materials, color, the general curb appearance of the building, and then some other minor adjustments for drive-through windows and of the like. As far as the parking lot itself, some of the changes that are included are in addition to the building remodel, so there's the new signage on the building. The drive-through itself is going to stay the same. It's in a similar location. Nothing's changing there, other than the fact that we are updating that along with the building to incorporate the new, current drive-through equipment that they have at newer McDonald's. If you've been to a new McDonald's, they have digital menu boards. They have a digital pre-browse board. Again, as was mentioned, technically considered electric message boards under your code, but the goal here is not roadside advertising, as that code was basically written towards. The intent of these signs is simply for a drive-through customer to be able to view the menu items. In addition to the digital menu boards, the other drive-through equipment that will be added includes a new order canopy, so where you pull up and actually place the order that has the speaker stand, there'll be a canopy for weather protection there. You have your traditional clearance gateway bar, as we call it, for the height clearance, so you don't have any large vehicles entering the drive-through and going underneath that canopy. The parking itself, again, relatively the same as existing. Changes to that really had to do with some circulation adjustments and going back and bringing things more in line with the previously approved plan, which I believe was the one you mentioned, 91 or 98. That had to do with the double striping, the hairpin striping. Just over the years, things were seal coated, things were restriped, the double striping was lost. Spaces got a little out of whack. So what we did is we worked with Jasmine to get the site back to, basically what was approved. The number of spaces, the striping, as far as the double striping. And another adjustment that we made was to reinforce that one-way circulation around the building, so that counterclockwise circulation that I mentioned. Under that previous approval, in the front of the building, so between the building and Odenhall Avenue, originally was 90-degree perpendicular parking. That kind of allowed two-way circulation. Really wasn't the intent. The intent was one-way circulation, so what we've done is realign the parking in the front of the building there to angled parking, to reinforce that one-way parking, and place do not enter signs where that parking bay exits the circulation aisle, or intersects the circulation aisle along the rear of the site. Again, just reinforce that one-way circulation, a little better circulation pattern. In addition to the other site adjustments I mentioned, the building itself, there is a total of 96 square feet being added in two portions of the building. There's a 10 square foot addition to relocate one of the drive-through windows. Currently there's a drive-through window located on the rear of the building. We're going to be relocating it to the, I'm going to call it the northwest side of the building, the side that's facing the common access drive, where the remainder of the drive-through windows are currently located. Reason being, it offers better circulation and a more efficient drive-through use. By pushing that window forward, we're able to move some more cars in between the menu board and the drive-through windows instead of cars stacking further out into the regular access drive lane. In addition to the building, and then that was 10 square feet, and then there was a 86 square foot addition at the rear of the building. That is for crew room space. They just needed some more training area, place for the crew to sit, so that's what that addition's for. Interior of the building, really the major changes there are the dining areas. So all your customer areas, your customer service areas, all brand new. They all get a makeover. Something in line, more of a cafe style interior. You've probably seen it at some of the newer McDonald's. So all that gets a refresh. In addition, all the bathrooms, they get redone. Your customer order area gets redone, and then everything gets brought up to current ADA requirements as well. And then that includes the site. You can get new ADA parking and a new pedestrian access route out to Odenhall Avenue that meets all current ADA requirements. So that's part of this remodel as well, is bring everything up to snuff with current ADA requirements. Next is here are the colored elevations that are proposed. The materials include, the facade materials include brick, hardy plank siding. You have wood grain tile, darker color, what we call brand walls or arcade walls. Those are those two kind of prominent architectural features, one at the center of the facade that faces Odenhall Avenue, and the other one kind of on the corner that faces North Frederick, with the M logo centered on each one. And then you have the McDonald's ID sign in addition to that M logo located on that front facade facing North Frederick. As was mentioned, the M logo sign is 14 square feet, and then the McDonald's wording itself, you're looking at 32.8 square feet. So you have 46.8 square feet of signage on the front facade facing North Frederick, and 14 square feet facing Odenhall Avenue, which is greatly under what's permitted. One of the adjustments we are requesting tonight is really the ability to place that signage that works best with the building and matches the McDonald's branding that they're instituting nationwide, which is that separate M logo and then the McDonald's wording on the front of the building. As part of their new design, they look to keep that M logo on that brand wall, and then the McDonald's wording on the other side of the building. We feel it's a more architecturally pleasing way to present the signage. Theoretically, if you're to squeeze them together and consider it one sign, it would be permitted as far as area, and it would be well below the allowable, but we're looking to separate the two, and as proposed on that elevation.
Real quick, if you would, just to clarify, if you can zoom in on the elevation of the Odenthal side, yeah, the middle one there.
Yeah.
And
Oops.
maybe just briefly go back through the materials and
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I did
kind of use the
kinda-
cursor to point where what you just described, frankly, but if you wouldn't mind do it as more of a graphic.
Mhm.
tour.
So the materials, you have a brick base at the bottom, which is similar to what's there today, but it'll be a painted brick. It'll be the actual color is a Chelsea gray, which is the main body color for the building.
Sorry, you're replacing the brick or you're painting the existing?
They'll be painting the existing brick and infilling wherever they need to. There will be some new brick with the building additions, but again, that will be a gray brick.
Okay.
Above that, if you look to the kind of the upper portion of the building, the upper half, I'll call it, I got a hardy plank siding, again in that Chelsea gray. And then you have a corrugated metal parapet along portions of the building along the top. The building height itself will actually be a little higher for that parapet wall. Currently it's 16'11" to the top of the parapet as part of the proposal. The heights will vary a little bit. You'll have 18 feet to the top of the parapet where I'm showing the cursor for that corrugated metal panel. The arcade wall that I mentioned, this is that wood grain tile arcade wall architectural feature that they're proposing.
When you say wood grain tile, it's a porcelain or ceramic?
Yeah,
It
so
is,
it's a tile, but it has that wood grain pattern to it.
You used to use it on the floor.
Yeah.
You've come a long way. Still have some left over, right?
Recycle.
So that's the main feature in the center of the building. That's to accent the main entrance along that facade, as well as an architectural feature on the front corner that faces North Frederick. You've got an aluminum trellis system. They got variation, different colors and different trellis systems around the building, mainly over the windows and the drive-through windows themselves. You still have the storefront glass. None of that's changing. That all remains as it is today.
So is that a trellis or is it a hard awning?
It's a trellis. It's a
It is,
trellis
so light's
system.
going to filter through it and...
Yes. Yes. Well, I think under the doors and the drive-through elements, they have more of a shielding to it, just for weather protection at the entrance and obviously for the window openings.
Okay.
Other than that, you've got some accent lighting along the building. These are those little gray boxes that you see. And then they have down lighting, within the trellis and the top of the arcades themselves to provide some accent lighting at night. Oops. There, maybe we should let you drive. And then the only last thing we had, again, the adjustments that were requested is for the M logo on the front of the building to be separated from the ID sign itself. And that's considered an ancillary sign, so the 42 inches versus the 1 foot that's allowed. I'm probably moving through it too fast. And then the electronic message boards, technically being the menu boards for the pre-browse board at the rear, and then the menu board itself at the rear.
So it's kind of a micro thing, but the illuminated menu boards, which way are they actually facing? So do you see them only when you drive up on them, or will you be able to see them from either Odenthal or?
You won't be able to see them for a roadway just because of the position of them. The angle of them is really towards the rear of the site. Maybe at the corner, Odenthal, if you're really looking and stretching your neck, you might be able to catch a glimpse of it, but you'd be pretty hard pressed to see them from a roadway. Again, it's static images. It's not movies or videos or anything like that playing, or commercials or anything like that. It's simply an electronic version of their menu and whatever, other branding material or images they might have had on the
Right.
menu board under.
But the imagery and the brightness and all the things about the graphics are calibrated for someone to see them up close. They're not meant,
Yes,
they're not.
correct. That's right.
Okay.
Correct.
The only thing I'd like to add is there was a peculiar situation which presented itself relating to the subdivision status of the property. And when I realized, when I saw the staff report on Friday and I realized that there was a condition requesting that we prepare a new final plat for the property, I was a little taken aback, especially since I did this case in 1998. I couldn't possibly imagine how I could have missed anything back then. But it is very, very odd how this occurred, because this was a 4-acre parcel back in 1960. And then it was sold to a developer, and they did a subdivision that created 2 platted lots out in the front. One was known as Parcel B, which is the site where the McDonald's restaurant building is located. And then subsequently, 10 years later, the balance of the property was the subject of a plat of subdivision. And when they did that plat, there was an engineering error, and they actually showed this parcel as being larger than what it actually is. And so that created this little rectangular shaped vacancy area, which was approved as part of the original site plan and as part of the building permits. And yet it's not the subject of a plat. It was never an illegal subdivision created by deed. It was just an engineering error when the second plat was prepared and was processed. And so we're going to take care of that as a minor subdivision.
And all of your site improvements are well within the boundaries, the
Yes.
actual boundaries, not the.
Yeah, no, we do have some parking. There are some parking spaces that are in the rear that were
It's all
approved.
within the
Yeah, it's all-
property.
Yes.
Yeah. But I mean, it's all owned by McDonald's,
Yeah.
but it's just, there's a little strip in the back that was never subdivided. So we're gonna take care of that with a minor subdivision. And we, I think I drove your staff crazy today with many phone calls about how we were gonna correct this and how it actually, we were all on the phone going over deeds and plats, and but we got it straightened out,
Okay.
and we now understand what we need to do. And so, thanks very much to your staff for all the help they gave us and get working through that.
Okay.
That's it.
We'll see a fresh piece of Mylar for that then, I guess. All right, so is that all for the presentation?
It is.
Okay, great. Is there anyone in the audience that's here to comment on this application? Okay, well, seeing nobody, Jasmine, if you'd give us the wrap-up, please.
Okay, I do want to note that we did revise the conditions on the first motion, so I'm going to read the revised
Okay.
for the first one. So staff recommends that the planning commission, based on the exhibit submitted, the applicant's testimony, and the staff report findings and recommendation, grant AFP-7842-2018 amendment to final site plan finding in compliance with sections 24-170 and 24-172A of the city code with 2 conditions. And condition 1 is applicant to receive approval and recordation of a final record plat prior to final inspections. And condition number 2 is applicant to submit revised site plan to address minor label error to be approved by staff prior to issuance of any permits. The second motion is staff recommends that the planning commission, based on the exhibit submitted, the applicant's testimony, and the staff report findings and recommendation, grant approval for an electronic message board finding in compliance with section 24-212 of the city code. And staff recommends that the planning commission, based on the exhibit submitted, the applicant's testimony, and the staff report findings and recommendation, grant approval to permit 42-inch tall ancillary signs in compliance with section 24-213AF of the city code.
On the 42-inch tall, the approval for that, is that in excess of an allowed height, or is it just that it's there at all? It has to be approved.
So ancillary signs, we only allow them to be up to 12 inches
12
in
inches.
height.
So like for directional signs and things like that.
So they're requesting it for a larger.
Which is the menu board.
Yeah.
Okay.
For the
It's the
M
big M.
logo.
It's the big end.
Big end.
The M logo, or the document.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, I thought the height. This was for the height. So the menu board itself, the height of that, and it's as a sign is okay.
Yeah,
it's just that it's an
it's a-
electronic reading or electronic message board is the waiver that's required
Yeah,
there.
because the pre-menu board constantly, it changes more than the static menu.
Right. Okay. And I think I heard from the applicant, and I just want you to nod and say he wasn't kidding around, that if the M had been ganged with the main sign, it would have complied with the overall allowable sign on the building. Is that right?
Because we would count it as one sign,
Yeah.
but this one, it kind of reads it's two separate.
Sure. Okay. All right. Concerns, questions? Go ahead.
Yes, I've always had a little heartburn about the parking, I guess that's on the northeast side, because individuals who park there have to walk across the main section of the drive-through. Was there any thought given to having like a striped area for walking across? So, I mean, because I guess people would just kind of meander through that little section. They've got to cross that little section of the parking lot. There's that little island, you know, with the shrubs and everything. Then they got to really cross the drive-through.
I think it's a great point. If you zoom in, is there a crosswalk or is there protected pedestrian access?
Yeah.
Through the island.
Yeah. Or even across the
even the other way
drive
too,
aisle.
but right here too. Yeah. That really, I mean, I think that's
So
an
you're
issue.
talking from,
Right across that side where that parking is.
uh-huh.
Mm-hmm. Because they have to cross the drive-through there, and that's the main,
There-
access to the lot, right, to the site. On either side of that.
The landscape island has a pretty big dip in it,
Mhm.
so it wouldn't be the best
It
thing
wouldn't
for
be,
walking
but-
across.
But I'm just wondering, is there some way we could put some sort of striping, maybe not there, but I don't know. I'm just concerned
it
about.
might confuse the drive-through people. I think that's one of the things
Okay.
that we've struggled with before, and especially in these smaller lots that
Mhm.
it becomes too confusing to both the pedestrians and.
I mean,
and
I can see that, because when you drive through, you're trying to figure out how, when you're driving,
Right.
you're trying to figure out how do I get to the drive-through?
Yes, and this
Yeah.
site is circuitous around the drive-through, and that was
Right.
in order to keep that landscape island. That was a big directive of the Planning Commission back in '98 when we redid this.
Okay.
That's great.
I just have a little heartburn, when people are walking through. No, it's not from McDonald's. But it's, just walking across, that section. I just wanted to note that. I'm just a little, and I've visited this McDonald's at 3 o'clock in the morning. My wife wanted sweet tea. So.
Blame it on your wife.
Sure. If there was any traffic, you have to worry about that.
I think it's a good recommendation to the landowner, just to say, like, if you find a deer trail there and it's becoming used, then you may want to clarify it with some kind of stair or
Yeah, just note
something,
that.
yeah.
Just note that.
That's a good
Well,
point.
I think, the way that it looks right now,
Mhm.
you have that stripe area in, to direct the drive-through traffic. That connects directly to like the parking section that has striped. I wonder if there's a way to accommodate a walkway within that stripe area that continues all the way through your landscape turn. I don't know if you guys are following me. This,
Out there?
Yeah.
You wouldn't want to extend the sidewalk across?
no.
Put some stairs in there?
No,
Okay.
this way, and so get rid of the landscape that we're seeing with the two
No,
circles,
I don't think we can get rid of
and
the
you walk
landscape.
behind the signage.
I don't think we can get
Yeah,
rid of
for
the
me,
landscape.
I wouldn't want them going across almost 60 feet of asphalt. I'd want to figure out a way to get them off the
They-
asphalt as much as possible.
But they're gonna do it regardless, is that?
Yeah, I think they're going to come through the woods.
No, we shouldn't.
So-
Yeah.
Through the woods, but there's something
Right.
blocking it.
Yeah, right. But I guess maybe.
I think the bigger goal is knowing that there's a car-heavy focus for the site
Right.
because of the drive-through
Right.
lane.
Right.
What there isn't is an obvious place for a pedestrian to find their way from the parking lot to the building. If you imagine that whole parking, or that whole drive aisle queuing for the drive-through being filled with cars and focusing on their menu board instead of who might be walking from their right, coming from one of the parking lanes. And I don't know the answer because, like Matt called it a deer trail, you don't necessarily know until you see people walk the site and kind of where the natural natural draw is from parking to the door. But I think it's something we've had to deal with on enough site plans where we've got to figure out a way to explicitly make a safe path of travel for pedestrians coming from a parking field. And the drive-through lane complicates that because it's not as obvious, and it's also, like you said, your number one priority is to keep it simple on the drivers.
Exactly.
We need to ratchet up a little bit the safe path of travel for a pedestrian. And I don't know that we can solve it tonight, but I think it might be turning into a little bit of a relook with staff to figure out what that looks like in real life.
Sure. And that's all I just wanted to point that out. I'm not trying to hold anything up. I really just am a bit concerned about that, and just give that some consideration.
We understand.
Okay.
We understand. Thank you
and
for your
then,
comments.
could you bring back the burglar for me?
Never should have left.
Mr. Winburn.
I'm sorry. I had to get my little.
You're old. You're Mr. Winburn. All right. Let me I'm going to do this kind of in reverse order because I don't want to get the small stuff first. Anybody have any issues with the change in technology on the menu board system doing the electronic reader? Okay.
No.
I would just add for the record that I think it's an internal sign the way I think of it. It's not addressing the street. No, it's an internal sign for me. So it's not really a sign meant for external.
And the way it's angled too. The way, because they redid the one near, like off of Crafts Branch. I think that's had a renovation, and I've noticed that they have the signs there and they're angled in. So
is the sound system still as bad though? Do you think? Okay, so no issues with the electronic reader board? No. How about the proposed split icon or split logo and signage that kind of creates a new calculation? No. Any issues with that?
Not at all.
Okay.
No,
all right, good.
I think that's a corporate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
It's a fairly modest signage package, and I don't
Right.
think any of
It
it's
is.
and it fits architecturally in the walls that it's in. It's not oversized or dramatic.
Yeah.
I mean, that other building was getting dangerously close to going to the Historic District Commission. You know? It's about time you wrote it. It's really what about, okay, so now how about the architecture, the proposed architecture? Any questions or issues on the refresh of the building?
I'll add, I think it's a nice reserved, sort of neighborly design. I think it's
It's understated. It's
understated.
very understated.
Yeah, I know. I'll say anecdotally, I'm guessing that the current building was during an era when everybody was trying to make it look like it had some context pressure, and for us it was all about little colonial revival buildings everywhere.
Very much.
It's not a bad thing to start embracing a little bit more of the modern world, I know. So any other general issues with the proposal?
No.
Questions, comments?
Looks great. I think you've solved a lot of the problems that have always sort of bugged me about the site, and it's great to see.
I don't go to drive-throughs. Why do you need 3 windows rather than 2?
It's a good question. So,
because a lot of us do go to drive-thrus.
Really the purpose of the third window, so you have the first window is your payment window, second window is where traditionally you'll pick up the meal, and the third window is if it's not ready and your order is the larger order or something that's taking a little longer, they can just simply move you up to the third window, stage you there, and you wait, and they can hand it right out to you instead of directing you to a parking space or something else. So it's just really a convenience factor.
I didn't know that either. Okay.
Logistics.
The inner workings of it.
Right.
I know all about it, so if you need it.
Are you a third window guy?
I'm a third window guy.
All right.
I got teenagers.
If there are no other comments or questions, concerns, okay. I did want to ask you, Jasmine, how do we want to work in that issue about working through the pedestrian access? What would that look?
Like a separate condition.
It's a work with staff condition.
Right,
It's
work
not a
with staff.
comeback.
Right.
Does that make sense?
That's fine.
Work with staff.
That's fine.
To enhance the
But
pedestrian access to the
So it's
building
3.
from the rear parking lot.
I think to provide a route, like a logical way in which pedestrians will access the building.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it is a provide, you're right.
So you got 3.
Right.
Okay.
Does that sound all right with you guys?
Good.
So does that become a condition 3 on the first?
Yes.
No, it wouldn't be.
On the
Yes.
three.
Three
Yes.
conditions on the
Because
first.
there's 2 conditions. Remember, we added the
Yes.
second
Yeah.
condition.
So that would be
it's the
number
third
3 on the
con-
first approval.
Correct.
Okay, if there's no further discussion, is there a motion, please, on the first component of this, which is the final site plan.
Yes. Mr. Chairman, I move that we, the Planning Commission, based on the exhibits submitted, the applicant's testimony, the staff reports and findings and recommendation, and our discussion this evening, grant AFP 7842-2018 amendment to final plan, finding it in compliance with section 24-170 and 24-172A of the city code with the 3 conditions identified this evening.
Second.
It's moved and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously. All right, next up is the motion to allow the electronic message board for the menu system.
Sure. Mr. Chairman, I move that the Planning Commission, based on the exhibit submitted, the applicant's testimony, and the staff report, findings and recommendations, and our discussion this evening, grant approval for an electronic message board, finding it in compliance with section 24-212 of the city code with no conditions.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously.
Okay.
And then we need a motion for the 42-inch tall ancillary sign, which is the logo on the building.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I move that the Planning Commission, based on the exhibit submitted, the applicant's testimony, and the staff report, findings and recommendation, and our discussion this evening, grant approval to permit 42-inch tall ancillary sign in compliance with section 24-201A, paren F of the city code with no conditions.
Second.
It's moved and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that passes unanimously. Thanks very much. Good
Thank
luck.
you.
Great,
Thank you.
It was a pleasure to be here. Good night.
And thanks for keeping the building fresh.
Right.
All right, next up is our last site plan for the evening, which is SP-7868-2018, The Chase at Quince Orchard, new 106-unit residential community for the property located at 12311 Darnestown Road in the MXD mixed-use development zone. And this is final site plan. Looks like Greg Mann from staff is presenting. Good evening, Greg.
Good evening. Staff is before you tonight to introduce application SP-7868-2018. The applicant is requesting approval for a new 106-unit single-family residential community known as the Chase at Quince Orchard. The subject property is located at 12311 Darnestown Road and is zoned MXD. The new community will comprise of 26 single-family detached homes and 80 townhomes. The property is included as part of the Johnson properties, which were annexed into the city on December 19th, 2016. Subsequently, SDP 7716 2017 was approved by the City Council on January 16th, 2018. Tonight's application is the final site plan based on the approved SDP. Here tonight to present the application is the applicant, Luis Gonzalez with Lanier. I will turn the presentation over to him.
Great. Good evening.
Good evening.
Hello, everyone.
How you doing?
Good evening. I'm Luis Gonzalez with Lanier Homes. I would like to first and foremost thank staff for their hard work and effort to bring us forward today, and for the Planning Commission for all the feedback you've provided throughout the process. I would also like to thank you for giving us the opportunity to present this complete, connected, and environmentally sensitive community this evening.
You're welcome.
On a personal note, it's exciting to have the opportunity to bring another Class A community to the city of Gaithersburg. For the commissioners who might not know me, I used to be a resident of the city of Gaithersburg and served on the Environmental Affairs Committee for several years. For over 12 years, I've contributed to, in one form or another, to the success of several award-winning communities throughout the city. In fact, one of the projects I worked on recently received an award for planning excellence from the city. I share this to express my commitment to excellence in the city. Now, I'm sure you might have heard by now that Cal Atlantic and Lanier Homes have merged. Lanier is one of the nation's leading home builders and has a long legacy of creating great and diverse communities that provide quality and healthy living. And we plan on maintaining that legacy of excellence with the Chase at Quince Orchard. Now, before I ramble too long, I'd like to hand it over to our counsel, Stuart Barr, with Lurch Early and Brewer, and our landscape architect, James, with FICA, and to go into greater detail on how we plan to deliver excellence. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Louise. Stuart Barr with the law firm Lurch, Early and Brewer in Bethesda. Thank you very much for the opportunity this evening to present this final site plan application. Hopefully this property and this project look familiar to most of you. We've been working on this project for many years and are excited to finally be at this stage, the final site plan stage. So what I'm going to do is talk a little bit about the context as to how we got to this point, refresh some recollections in case any memories have faded about the prior approvals, and then I'll turn it over to James to talk about some of the details of the site plan. So, as you may recall, we've been working on this extensively. This property went through a very long process of being annexed from Montgomery County into the city of Gaithersburg, and then in connection with annexation, we executed an agreement with the city and the property owners that addressed a number of items with development. Of course, the sketch plan was approved at that time. Then we went through a schematic development plan, as Greg said, and now we're here. And just to recap quickly, the annexation agreement that provided the context of the development and the sketch plan, it allowed up to 110 units on the property. This is the 14 western acres of the entire 23 acres that were annexed. It required a minimum 1 acre park with 10 parking spaces, minimum 18-foot wide townhomes, 2 parking spaces for every unit, and then affordable housing, workforce housing units, and moderately priced dwelling units, and then other provisions, including an expanded traffic study and some more details. So that was the overall context that the annexation agreement and the sketch plan provided. So that was over a year ago. We've been working on the schematic development plan and now the final site plan, and we are really in lockstep with the prior approvals and the context that was created after that extensive process. So we're proposing 106 units now, 26 single-family detached, 80 townhomes. That's within the 110 allowed. We are proposing slightly over 1¼ acres. Minimum 1 acre was required. We're at 1.26. The townhomes meet the minimum width requirement. We providing more than adequate parking spaces. That was reviewed pretty carefully at schematic development plan. And then the affordable units, 8 each, workforce housing, 8 moderately priced dwelling units. So, next slide, please. Thanks. So the final site plan that's before you this evening meets the findings and is very consistent with the annexation agreement, sketch plan, the schematic development plan, MXD zone, and the master plan. And we are very confident that it meets the findings, including compatibility with existing and planned land uses. That's been studied really over the past couple years very carefully by not only the county and the city, but in our outreach with the community. Adequate public facilities are provided. We looked at that at SDP with transportation, schools, water, sewer, and all the APF requirements. We're proposing 1 development phase for the project, and the fact that the plan's in the public interest, that's really an SDP finding. But we, as Luis said, we're very excited about the design of this community, how it's going to transition, allow for a transition between the existing commercial and then the single-family communities to the north and west. The affordable housing it's going to provide, the connectivity, walkability, access to schools and commercial and employment, and we think it's really a tremendous project. Just to go through quickly some of the technical final site plan findings, we're not aware of any incompatible it's D, start from the beginning here. We're not aware of any adverse effect on the health or safety of persons residing in or working on the land in question or in the neighborhood thereof. We don't expect this to be detrimental at all to the public welfare or adversely affect the use or development of adjacent or surrounding properties. We're not aware of any violation. This development will create any violation of the zoning ordinance or other city laws or ordinances. We've studied compatibility very carefully over the years and designed it to be as compatible as possible and we believe this will be in harmony with the existing and proposed uses around it. And then finally, it'll meet the environmental standards of the city, predominantly forest conservation, stormwater management, and the like. Just two very quick items before I turn it over to James. A couple of very recent minor changes that we've made that may result in slightly revised conditions of approval. First of all, the design guidelines that were approved in connection with schematic development plan for sound walls and fence posts allow a wood or masonry pier material, and we're proposing a composite material. For some reason, the design guidelines, we think it was an oversight, inadvertently omitted composite. The design guidelines allow composite material for the actual sound wall or fencing itself, just not for the posts for some reason. So because of that, we're asking the Planning Commission to approve a small modification to the design guidelines just to allow the post to be a composite material also. And that would allow a slight revision to proposed condition number 10 that would take out that first section that now reads that we would need to change the material to either wood or masonry pier, and would just continue that proposed condition to say that we need to receive final approval for the height and the noise, confirmation from the noise consultant.
I think at the right time, wherever in the presentation falls, just give us a view of what that is.
Okay,
If you do
sure,
the composite
sure.
post,
James can touch on that.
Okay.
And then secondly, some of the plans reflected that some off-site trees were proposed for removal. We're not proposing to remove any off-site trees. In fact, we want to preserve everything off-site. So we need to revise our plans and propose tree protection measures in some cases. So we're prepared to do that, and we'll jump on that quickly. So accordingly, there are two proposed conditions under the Forest Conservation Plan. So our proposed change to number 1 would be that we need to submit final forest conservation plans to reflect tree protection measures for off-site trees, and that needs to be reviewed and approved by staff before issuance of any permits. And then the second condition, I think that can just remain, that we're happy to make the minor labeling and editing changes that are necessary.
We'll go over that in discussion, but thanks for flagging that.
Say again?
We'll go over that during discussion, but thank you for bringing that up at the beginning.
So those are just two minor revisions, and otherwise we're happy to take questions, but let's have James talk about some of the details, and then we'll be here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'd also like to thank you for your time, not just tonight, but in the last couple of years as this project's moved forward from annexation through schematic. I think Stuart gave a pretty good summary of the process and the background and the context of the project, and I think everyone's familiar with the project site where it is. But just to sort of step back in terms of a design approach to this project, you know, some of the goals for this development were to create a visually interesting, attractive, and sustainable community for people of all ages, residents or guests, and that includes people in different communities on the north and northeast. And we think the final, you know, this is accomplished through the preparation of the design guidelines, which were approved at the schematic development plan. And we really feel that this current final design in front of you tonight, as well as the forthcoming architecture that's not included in this application, are really guided and informed by the design guidelines. And I'd like to show you some of the components of the development. In terms of, before we get to like really super site-specific details, we want to talk a little bit more about the context and where it is. Stuart mentioned that it was the western 14 acres of the what's known as the Johnson property, and right now it's a vacant piece of property with an old nursery facility on there. And what this development does is through this design process, we provided 3 main connection points to and from this development. 2 are on Darnestown Road, and one is at the north at Nursery Lane. The two in Darnestown Road will allow full on the lower left of the image in front of you. That's the entrance, the main entrance to the community. That's a right in, right out onto Darnestown that will allow people to come in and go out that way. And then the circle to the lower right is the existing signalized intersection in the shopping center that provides current access to the Safeway and the other commercial centers. And in order to get to that full signalized intersection, we provided a private drive connection between the Safeway building on the south side of the Safeway and between the gas station there on the north. And there's some more details later in this presentation that shows you how some of that's handled in terms of the vehicular connection. In addition, you can see we have a full network of on-site sidewalks, interior loop road, and all the streets are public. As Greg has outlined, there's 106 proposed units, 80 townhomes, 26 singles. The singles are on the outer ring, starting at the 6 o'clock around to your 9, all the way up to 12. Those are all single-family units, 26 again. And then the houses in the grid form south of those townhomes on the east side of the property are 4 blocks of townhomes comprising 18-foot units, 20-foot units, and 24-foot units. All the in the singles. While the architecture is not included in this application, but I thought it's important to touch on some of the sort of future intentions in terms of the materials. The single families, for example, will have multiple models, and there will be a variety of options when it comes to the materials. But that will be dealt with on a future application. Parking is provided for the townhomes. Parking is provided in the rear of the townhomes, and they're accessed by alleys. The parking for the singles is accessed from the front along the main loop road, which is called Johnson Meadow. Is it street? Okay, sorry, Johnson Meadow Lane or Street. Sorry. And so each of the singles has 2 driveway spaces and 2 garage spaces. For the townhomes, the 20-foot units and the 24-foot units each have a two-car garage as well as two car spaces in the driveway. The 18-foot units, which there are 8 of, have a single driveway space and a single garage space, which meets the annexation terms of minimum 2 spaces per unit. And the 20 and 24s each have 4, so they're very well parked. In addition to the on-street parking provided in the development. As far as the open space is arranged, the majority of the open space is arranged near the core of the development and is easily accessible to all residents. A little more on the open space. The program of the 3 main spaces consists of a community park. It's the red circle, the large outline red rectangle with the numbers 1 and 3 in there. And those numbers key back to some of the images to the left of that plan view. The neighborhood park is the more rectangular east-west running rectangle with the number 2 in it. And again, that's a key back to an image of a pergola that's at the end of that space. And then the smaller space, which is lowest in the plan, is what we're calling a pocket park. It's not programmed. It's a small, more intimate space that can be used for small gatherings and even small open play. Just real quickly on the main community park, there is a multi-age playground that's about 3,600 square feet, a little bit more. It's on a radius, so it's 3,600 square feet plus, with 3 play devices on there for multi-age. This is a perspective aerial sketch of what that community park looks like. And if you look at the image to the lower right, the black arrow shows you the direction of how that's being viewed. And you can see that, given the scale of the houses and the scale of the open space, it's pretty sizable. And as was described, it's just over 1.25 acres. Here's another illustrative perspective sketch of what we're calling the neighborhood park. And again, with the image in the lower right with the black road, you can see the direction of the view. This is looking east to west towards the pergola at the end that overlooks the community park. A little bit more on the general street design aspects. All the roads are lined with trees. There's 5-foot sidewalks throughout. There is an 8-foot section of sidewalk on the inner ring road, the connecting Darnestown all the way up to Nursery Lane, which is a pretty gracious sidewalk width. There's plenty of parking as has been worked out in SDP. There are 60 on-street visitor spaces plus 11 dedicated on-street spaces adjacent to the community park. And some of those images are just representative of the character and feel and some of the elements that will occur near the right-of-way. The edges, what we're calling edges, includes a variety of elements: the alley screening, the walls and fences, buffers, and the entry signage. And all the edges are treated with either vegetative screening, fences, walls, or other environmental buffers, including the forest conservation located along the northern property line. Along Darnestown Road, along Plan South, there's a combination masonry wall and a board-on-board composite fence that provides screening but also mitigates sound for the units along Darnestown Road. Along the western edge of the project, behind the singles, there's a combination of evergreen and deciduous plantings to provide screening for the adjacent development. As I mentioned, along the northern edge, there's an area of forest conservation as well as a mixture of evergreen and deciduous plantings. The eastern edge, which backs up to the existing Safeway building, this is the really transition to the existing commercial area. Today, what exists is a screen of large white pines. And we've got no intentions of taking those trees out, and we've made quite a few design changes and along the way to try to ensure that the damage to those trees in terms of roots and proximity is minimal. But even so, we're going to be supplemental planting with additional street trees or shade trees, as you see on the plan in front of you. And then more internally, at the ends of each of the alleys, we do provide screen walls to help screen the alleys from the neighborhood park, for example, and also from the streets. A little bit more on the sound wall along Darnestown Road. This is an illustrative representation of the western portion of that front wall, and I think what this shows is, like I said, the masonry section, and the masonry wall is designed right now to be per the noise guideline, per the noise study, an 8-foot tall masonry fence. And this is a serpentine wall, so it doesn't convey in elevation view in front that you see, but in plan view, it's got a nice serpentine layout to it, and with a nice brick facing with sizable monumental piers to help anchor the ends of the masonry wall. And there's some details to show the sort of character in black and white of the scale of those walls. Shifting to the right of that, or shifting east of that, this is the section of the composite fence that was the discussion that Stuart mentioned in terms of having the wood posts versus the composite posts. This is again an illustrative elevation of what that could look like. And while this has relatively based on the graphic, it's got a generous landscape. We're going to continue to work with staff to ensure that the buffer along this fence to help minimize the impact of a fence to the right of way, and what that looks like is duly addressed before staff will sort of sign off.
So does that transition on either side of the main entrance, the main roadway entrance, or does the masonry carry across to the other side of the roadway and then it picks up with the composite?
Sure. So I went back to the slide, and you can see the cars in the middle, and that's indicative of the main entrance to the community. So that masonry extends both sides of the main entrance.
So how far would it extend on the other side before it transitions to the?
You can see it a little bit in the corner.
Yeah, but how? I mean, you said it's
Yeah.
illustrative. What are you really?
Well, illustrative in terms of the color. This is a 2-scale
Okay.
dimensional drawing with the illustrative drawing to it.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
So is it fair
So
to say
what's-
that it would be at the depth of that lot?
And then some. I think it actually covers the part of the alley. It just covers it doesn't cover the entire alley. The transition is sort of mid alley. Just a pointer. Yeah.
So give or take about 30 feet from the
Roughly there, yeah.
from the bottom wall.
It works.
That's exhibits.
Exhibit
11, okay.
See it right here.
Mm-hmm. Here's the end of the masonry fence where my pointer is now.
Right.
And I can actually zoom in a little bit more. So here's the back of the house. Here's the house. Here's the back of the driveway.
Okay.
The next slide is showing a modular retaining wall, and in the image in the lower right shows you a key image of where that wall is located. And this is the private drive between the existing Safeway and the gas station looking south. And on this graphic, you see an elevation of the wall, and this is actually it's a little bit deceiving in terms of what you're looking at, because you're actually looking at all three sides of this wall if it were put together in a straight line. And so you see the ends as they're a little bit darker than the middle piece. Those are the ends that are turned around and flank north-south on the back of the gas station parking lot. And just so the wall itself is somewhere between 8 and 5 feet, depending. I think 8 is the tallest that we have. And on top of that, we have a 6-foot fence with integrated slats, thank you, into the chain link fence, as well as a guardrail or traffic barrier at the top, because that is the back of an existing service station. So we obviously don't want cars.
Are you adding lighting to that drive, private drive, I guess, or small road?
Right. No, we don't have any at the moment, but that's something that I think there's some lighting on the side of the Safeway, but we have not actively added any lighting there.
So is there a sidewalk next to that roadway too? Or?
There is a sidewalk, and we might have to go back to the plan view, Greg. And this was a main topic of discussion back at SDP, and that is a full 5-foot sidewalk on the north side of that private drive, connecting to the drive aisle of the Safeway, and then pedestrians would turn south to the existing sidewalk network towards Darnestown.
So long term, I mean, I know you control the whole site. Is it expected or anticipated this grade change stays forever, or this could get absorbed into the redevelopment of the commercial side at some point and not really be a part of that?
In the annexation agreement, it discusses that. When the commercial portion redevelops, that road becomes public. At that time, it would have to be redeveloped. We would not accept a road with a retaining wall in it.
Okay, fair enough. So that's the trigger I was looking for. Good.
And then one of the last things I want to touch on is just reinforcing some of the stuff that has been dealt with through the SCP process and in the final site plan, is just the reinforcement of the key lots and the architectural treatment of the lots that you see on the screen before you with the various color coding. And so, Lenore is fully engaged on dealing with the special treatment per the design guidelines. And that concludes the presentation.
So is it just a processing? Why aren't we seeing architecture tonight?
So we're still going through the selection process internally, and that's the reason why we're not bringing it forward yet.
But why would you bring forward the site plan without it?
This allows them to move forward with site development permits, so they can start doing their grading and putting the infrastructure in.
Okay.
Well, I guess I'll jump in and I'll say that I'm a bit concerned about how prominent the garages are on the units that you're proposing, and how little there is for a frontage of an actual facade for the homes that are being proposed. I think overall it reads like a car lives in there, but I don't know where the people get in.
So you're going to be concerned when your architecture comes
Absolutely.
that the entry, pedestrian entry, the home entry is prioritized in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, and I have seen some build products of Call Atlantic right now. There's a project in Norbeck, and that actually drives my concern how those read.
So physically, the garage could either be, flush with the main facade, it could be set back, or it could be pulled forward. And we don't really know how this is set up right now, right?
Well,
So
I think it leads to the flush condition. But again, having seen the product and everything, I think just heads up that it's going to be a key component
it's a good
in my
line,
end.
though, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wouldn't recommend a dark red brick building with a bright white garage door.
That's a good point. Yeah, good point. All right, any other questions before we go to the public?
At this point.
No questions?
I did.
Okay.
There's yet again another gaping, extending alleyway. I think I had this conversation with you guys on a different project, but I'm just wondering if there's any treatment being considered to break that corridor, that vast corridor that expands in the back of the townhomes along the green.
Can we identify where you're talking
Yeah, would you
about?
pull up the site plan? Maybe we could use the cursor to track the question a bit better.
So on the west side, you have these townhomes that are facing the green, but in the rear of them, you have this long service corridor that is just open, and I'm afraid that it's going to bleed and take away from the formality of the spaces that you've created. And so I'm just wondering if you are planning to cap those, use any treatment to cap and to close those corridors.
Yes, it's
View shed, sorry.
Yes, sorry. It's hard to see at this scale of the plan. We can go to the zoom in, but there are privacy fences extending from here to the other end of the alley, to the other house, as well as here, from here up across the back of the alley there. So it's full screening at the back of the alley.
Okay, and that same condition is taking place farther south, right there?
In this one, we have an offset fence to still allow for circulation, but visually, there's no visual passage through.
Okay. And then, one of the things that I remember having called out in the SCP process is there was a home sort of missing in the top part, and there's the exposed back of the one home on the top corner when you have that curve on the other side, on the east side. Along that curve, you have the townhomes, and there's an exposed back. What sort of treatment are you doing in order to prevent the service portion of this home to be exposed to?
We're talking this lot here.
No, the one in this, in the
this
bottom.
one?
That one, yep.
Yeah.
From this one. Oh, I see. So, we do have the screen on the sides, but you're right. I do see that there's an open view shed right back there.
That turns into a key lot kind of condition, or
Yeah, that's a key lot, certainly. And what these hatch areas here are 2 bioplanters. They'll have a variety of plant material inside of it. Unfortunately, we weren't able to have street trees in this area for view reasons coming around the bend. But you raise a good point.
I'm not asking for trees, I'm just asking for some sort of
You look at
break.
architecture, right?
No, not necessarily the architecture. A home needs the service and it needs the front. So I'm all for that person having the freedom of having their trash and not the uptidy facade. It's just we have to be mindful through our design of what we can do to mitigate that view shed.
Okay. All right, any other questions? All right, is there anyone here that would like to comment on this application? Please come up in no particular order, whoever wants to go first. I'll remind you that you have 3 minutes, and the little light will be green, and when there's 30 seconds left, it'll be 30 seconds left. And
Right. No, my name is Som Krishnamurthy, and I moved into the Hidden Ponds community back in December 2016. And this development directly affects my property. There are 2 houses which are right up to my fence, and I can borrow, if I open my kitchen window, I can borrow a cup of sugar from the neighbor. There is no separation. One of my neighbors had sent an email back in October to the Planning Commission asking for a buffer zone and maintain the green space which was around the existing neighborhood. And Mayor Ashman had assured that that would be considered, but in the final plan we don't see any of that has happened, and we are at this point where we are for the final plan approval. The second concern I have is the nursery lane is getting extended. There is no plan for speed enforcement, or there are no sort of roundabouts or anything. I have little kids who play around outside, and this becomes an hazardous situation, not only for my kids, for others as well.
so you're speaking of the road that comes in on the northwest corner of the site, and then it gets extended through this.
Yes, sir.
And then concerned with speed, because that's a dead end right now, I guess.
Yeah, that's the dead end. That nursery lane is going to get extended,
Right.
and my property is the last house at this moment. And there are 2 houses which are right coming next to my fence, and that is going to create a lot of problems, and my house will be rendered a glorified townhouse. Well, I moved into Gaithersburg because I wanted a single family house with some privacy and space, but with this 2 houses coming right next to my fence, that is going to be a problem for me.
Okay, thank you. When we finish with the comments, we'll get them to address the buffer zone and what there might be to mitigate speed or mitigate traffic issues at that connection. Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to comment? Okay, please come up. Good evening. How are you?
Hello. My name is Steve Lawrence, and I've been a resident locally to this development for 30 plus years. And first, we think Lemon will do an excellent job, and we're an advocate of developing a property that will fit right into our neighborhood. But with that comes some concerns. One is the retaining wall. On east and west of the property, there is no retaining wall. And they're talking about 8 foot. I mean, I can't even jump that high. And so that's kind of a concern of how does it cosmetically fit in while, adhering to all the other standards. So we'd like for you guys to maybe look at that a little closer. The second point I'd like to make is maybe it's because the architectural drawings aren't there, and you asked for them, that's good. But I always look at real world, like how do things flow and how do people live and where are they going to park? And if you look at the Cantlands, we underestimated parking there. Crown right now takes 3 turns to go through the traffic light at Great Seneca to Seminole Highway up to 370. So it's all about the flow of the traffic and so forth. So I'd love to see maybe the architectural drawings of parking, because if you look at those drawings they had, they were very nice, but they had 8 townhouses stacked on either side of a street, and I'm sure they're pretty tight streets. I'm sure that it's enough for 2 cars to get through. There is some parking there, but the way I counted, there was 8 parking spaces out front for 16 townhouses. That includes visitors, guests, and God forbid more than a family has more than 2 cars. Or even if they have 2 cars, if you park one in the garage or one in the driveway, I don't know about anybody else, but you end up parking them to the side out on the street so you can get through. And where I live, a lot of the communities end up parking, like a half mile away in front of other people's houses. So that's something I think should be looked at more closely. The other thing is that everyone should be aware that the traffic going to QO High School is, when they're in session, has been really, really difficult. And the major intersection for this is going to be coming out of the Safeway. And there's no discussion here about how either the state, county, or anyone's going to help, including developers, going to pay for having that intersection re-examined because, oh, am I running out of time? Sorry.
30 seconds.
30 seconds. So we need to look at that. That's going to be crucial because right now it's during a normal day in life, during school sessions, things back up to Rutherford. There's 5 portables going on 20 at QO right now. Rachel Carson lost their whole playground to portables, right? So we know all that, right? Anyway, thank you for your time.
Thank you. And you did remind me that we had that conversation about the intersection and how it was being managed, because I think there's some restrictions now and there's discussions about other restrictions. So we'll get into that with them, I think, as a follow-up. Thank you.
Excellent. Good luck. I mean, we all want the best, right?
Yes. Absolutely. Thank you. Anybody else would like to, is there anyone else who would like to comment on this application? Okay. All right, well, if you think of something, raise your hand. So let's go through these comments. And I'm just going to go through the order they came up, no particular implication of importance. The buffer zone between the proposed, probably the homes on the west side, or the single families and the detached in the existing neighborhood, what really exists there? What's the geometry of the buffer zone right now in the proposed plan? Because at this scale, it looks like everything is fairly close, and it's close, but. Yeah, so working your way along that side.
I presume we're talking about these 2 lots here.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can work your way around the corner too, but I think.
Sure. So I think if I recall correctly, the discussion at SDP was to effectively enhance the landscape in this area, recognizing that the proposed homes are actually further away than from the common property line than the existing house is today. What we've done here is we have a combination of evergreen and deciduous plantings, and staff's condition has already addressed the fact that we need to beef this up in terms of changing the plant material to help provide a more 365 screen, if you will, with more evergreens and densely foliaged material. In addition, once the report came out, we were having internal discussions, and Lennar is also, they're willing and able to provide a screening fence along the back property line to help supplement the vegetative screening. And so that's.
When will we get that resolved? Is there a final landscape plan condition that would cover this?
There is. There's a condition that staff's recommending that they, again, beef up the landscaping on the back of those
No,
lots.
sorry. The screen, if it was a fence, if that was going to be part of the solution, would that be also part of the landscape plan?
It'd be included part of the final site plan set, correct?
Okay. So that can be addressed as you work through that final landscape submittal. What's the distance, or what is the separation at that point?
Yeah, I know we reviewed those distances back at SDP. I could scale it, but let's see. The driveways for the singles, for example, are 20 feet deep from the house to the right-of-way line, and so I would guess that the existing house is somewhere in the range of 10 to 18 feet, and then the proposed structure without the option is at least 20 to 23 feet from the property line. And obviously, once you add that, if you added that morning room, whatever that room is called, the dash outline roughly at the center of the gray box, it still probably puts you within the 15 to 18 foot range.
Would that be a deck in any of these scenarios? As an option from the builder, are you proposing an additional room or nothing?
It could be a deck.
Okay. So what I'm thinking is that might be something we need to look at final architecture also, is understanding exactly what the extent of the building on the back is. Is the build-to line, Greg, what is the build-to line established right now?
The build-to line is the same as all the other lots. So it's the, I believe, 5-foot separation from the property line.
On the back?
These are the same building lines that were approved as part of the SDP.
Okay.
So it's a 5-foot build-to line at the rear.
From the property line.
That's right.
So where does that landscape buffer go?
We're talking these right here, right?
The landscape buffer right now is in that, it's definitely in a 5-foot buffer, but it would probably be a little bit more than that. There's no, we haven't dedicated a specific width for a buffer. Just added the plantings.
All right, so, okay. Another note to make for architecture, that's probably getting dangerously close to not working. I mean, if you've got to do what you're saying you're doing with layering and creating some depth of the landscape buffer, 5 feet's not a lot of room to do it in reality. So the story doesn't kind of hold water if you build out to that point.
Well, the idea is that, horizontally, 5 feet may be a little bit narrow. It could be, the more the better, but you can also do it in layers as well as combination with the fence. I think it's doable, but, I guess the question is what's acceptable.
Okay.
You have more than 5 feet to do it in, so if it's necessary, it can be 8, it can be 10.
But I think we'd be looking for that careful, this is getting down to the micro planning level, but I think in landscape you have to. So we'd be looking for that buffer to be, not overridden by the potential for a large extension off the back of those few units that are backed up so close to the existing. You following?
Yes.
Yeah. All right. The next item was the connecting to the existing street and the potential for through traffic driving, either volume or speed. Is there any comments from Public Works on that, Greg, and any kind of?
Well, let's let the applicant answer first. Is there?
To that question, no, there was no specific comment on that.
Right, I didn't think there was. That's why I was asking if Public Works had weighed in at all. And
No, there's no speed mitigation or slowing down mechanisms for that portion of the road. They are providing other locations within the development, though. For example, there is one right here. If it comes up, I can show you. There's one proposed right here, and then further down south, they are also providing.
to a certain extent, the offset in that connection is sort of a built-in deterrent a bit on speed.
Yeah, the reverse
Yeah.
curve as well as the tight curve coming to a full stop condition when it hits Flower Center Lane and Johnson Meadow.
Right.
You're a pretty skilled driver to get up to speed.
Well, but to be clear, that's actually a deliberative technique in some of the other new urban neighborhoods where it's a hard turn left or right because you can't take it fast, and it's it builds in a speed deterrent. I think over the course of the build out and ultimately when it's fully occupied, we can be looking at that from a Public Works kind of follow up if there needs to be any, because there's a lot of tools they could put into place, I think, later on if they have to.
Would there be public parking on that curve?
No.
No, on either side?
Either side.
Okay.
All right, the retaining walls, I'm not sure if I understood exactly where that comment was referencing on the plan. I know you showed us this
Gas
relatively, it's sort of off-site retaining wall, but was there anything else that's?
I think he was talking about the sound walls. If
maybe I'll ask. Which
Lawrence,
retaining wall were you referring to?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear.
What you referred to some tall retaining walls?
Right, it's an 8-foot retaining wall, right?
Yeah, on the front gas station.
the sound wall, the sound wall.
No, it's the one behind the gas
The gas
station.
station.
Is the retaining wall, but there's sound walls in the front of the development at the entrance.
The development, I was looking.
Oh, okay.
How tall is the sound wall in the front?
The sound wall is 8 feet, is an 8-foot masonry tall. It's not a retaining wall though. It's a
It's a
fence.
It's a wall.
Okay, it's a wall, and
A fence. It's
wall.
a fence. It's a
But
fence.
It's a fence.
east and west of
Talk
this
to the
property, there's
microphone.
no sound wall.
Can you address it at the microphone?
Okay, I'm sorry. So east and west of this property, there's no sound wall. So that was one of the things that we talked about, I don't know, a year and a half ago. And at the next development over, which is Willow Ridge, there's no sound wall at all. And from the Safeway and up to the whole intersection, there's no sound wall. So if we're looking for, cosmetically to fit in, and we had the name change from Enclave because we didn't want it to be separate and different, that how do we address the fact that also we're going to have the 6-foot wall?
Right. Yeah. So I think maybe the way to respond is what is really driving the decision for a sound wall there?
We had a noise analysis done during SDP in order to mitigate the noise down to the specific decibel. Those heights were determined at that time.
Required by city.
That's right.
By city requirements.
That's what
When,
it's called.
when the development to the west was built, there were no requirements for them to put a sound wall in.
Even though they might benefit from it, that
Right.
wasn't one of the requirements, and certainly the commercial area doesn't need to worry about that.
And when the state widened the road along there, I'm sure one of the things that they have to look at is sound too, and they did not feel it was required.
Okay. All right, and then the next one was, so the discussion about how many parking spaces per, I know you brought up there were units that had only one driveway, one garage space. Some with two driveway, two garage, but then there's a concentration of towns right in the middle of the plan. Maybe just revisit that site, part of the site plan, and sort of talk through how parking is distributed through there. And the scenario of visitor parking or overflow parking.
Sure. So on aggregate, there is 479 spaces provided. That's a combination of garage, on-street, and the driveway. The analysis was done during SDP and also during final to look at the ratio and the distribution of parking throughout the development, and staff felt that the ratios that we provided were within the I guess the guidelines and thresholds that were acceptable.
But for example, in the plan, do the units that would end up having just the one and one, are they all ganged together, or are they mixed in with some of the others so that there's a little bit of relief and you aren't pressuring?
They're fairly well spread out. The 18-foot units, I think that the worst case scenario is that we have one stick of 9 that has 3 of those units, and that's further south, where we do have a little bit more on-street parking. This stick up here, these 2 sticks up here only have one 18-foot unit.
Okay.
That's how that's distributed. This next block south, there are a total of 2 18-foot units, and there's on-street parking right in front of those two.
Both of those sticks have confronting streets or they confront streets, or you don't have any that are in pockets.
Blocks to the south, again, 18-foot unit with confronting parking on this street, as well as this one on Quince Avenue. And then this is the one that has 3 18-foot units. There's parking in the alley behind them, but there's also confronting parking in front of them.
Right.
So we feel that, especially with the addition of the parking in the alley, made a huge difference in terms of offsetting.
And in terms of scale, just if you're using anything as a comparison, say parts of Crown Farm, these runs of towns and the confronting streets are quite a bit shorter. I mean, there's just fewer units in general.
Yeah.
So hopefully that does relieve that a bit. And finally, let's revisit this intersection, the signalized intersection, and how the traffic flow is working today, and is there any implication to how the control may change, or how the flow may change with this?
So I look back at Stewart because we scratched our head at this at SDP, and we had Wells review that.
Right. Our transportation consultant Wells isn't here this evening, but they've been studying this from the very beginning. The way it functions now, it's a signal. If you're going westbound, you cannot take that left into the high school. I do not believe. Okay. You can only get into the high school if you're coming from the west, traveling eastbound. You can take that right in, and that's not proposed to change. For residents of the community coming through the connector aisle eastbound and then taking the right to get out to Darnestown, they would not be able to go across 28 Darnestown Road to get into the high school. So what Wells looked at, besides just general volume information, is they looked at the queuing distances at the intersection from the residential community coming out, I guess particularly in the AM, and they concluded that those queuing distances were adequate. And as far as signal like timing changes, I haven't heard of any proposals to change anything at this point. Certainly, if SHA wants to propose anything, we're happy to participate in that process. But right now, I haven't heard anything.
And you're building a decel lane coming up to the new entrance, or are you just taking advantage of what's already there?
There's a, can you pull up the plan, James? So coming westbound on 28, what are we showing there?
So the answer to that is no, we're not building a diesel lane. There's already an existing turn lane there, turning in and out of the shopping center.
So, but go further west.
At the gas station.
You're talking about the entrance down further?
Yeah, so
Okay.
I think
right.
it's actually like I don't know, it seems like it narrows there, and is that still the condition? Or
It starts to narrow right after our entrance.
After your
and
entrance,
tapers
okay.
up here.
Okay, so you still get the benefit of the extra width or the extra lane for somebody decel turning right into the neighborhood. Certainly you get it at the shopping center if they come in that way, but coming in the main entrance, you're out of the main line of traffic when you slow down for that turn, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, good. Any other questions we need to follow up on? No?
No questions.
Okay. So with that, Greg, you want to do the wrap-up and?
Yeah, so some of this may change depending on how your discussion goes as it relates to, again, modifying some of the design guidelines, and then the discussion, I guess, on the modified conditions that the applicant had proposed. Before that, though, there is an additional condition I do need to add. As part of our review, there are some existing county easements that do need to get extinguished before we can issue any permits. So the new condition will be developer must extinguish all existing county easements on residential and commercial portions of the property which are affected by the proposed residential development, which include but are not limited to county storm drain and stormwater management easements prior to the approval of a site development permit. Okay. And
so that's number 12.
Is that number 12? Is that number 3?
That'd be number 12 currently.
12. Okay.
Okay.
And then if the commission does choose to grant the modification to the design guidelines, I would recommend we do that by motion, and I can read that motion into the record if...
And just to note that the design guidelines have a paragraph that allows you to do this.
Correct.
So.
Yeah. Yes.
And that only addresses the materials for the uprights, for the posts, and
for the sound wall.
Correct.
For the sound wall.
Yes.
Can we? Let me just ask this: Can we? And I'm not saying we wouldn't want to do this motion, but would that also be approvable just as a part of the landscape plan or some follow-up when the architecture comes in, for example?
Yeah.
It would be in this set of plans. The final design of the wall is part of the site plan. So.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I'd
Staff
love to,
supports the waiver.
Well, I think what John's saying, right, is that can we skip amending the guidelines and just approve it on the plan? But I'd love to change the design guidelines just to make.
Okay. I was just asking if that's.
I love when design guidelines carry weight.
All right.
So basically, you're anticipating that we would want to have some room to make suggestions to the guidelines, things that we have not.
Well, currently, we're just discussing the change to the text.
I understand, but by foregoing that that approval.
I wouldn't want to do that. I'm saying I want to value those guidelines, so I want to make sure we amend the guidelines to what we want end up building.
Okay.
So, because
And my only issue was just sort of holding out that it was the idea that the guidelines had some review and, sort of careful consideration, and we had some sense of what those elements were, just kind of throwing in, well, it can be Trex. I don't know, I know what Trex is, make no mistake about that, but, what does that mean really in terms of what would be allowed?
We're really talking
think so.
specifically to change that, not change the guideline, but to modify, or to approve the fence, the sound wall fence, to allow the Trex posts to go along with the Trex boards. Not modify the whole guidelines to allow Trex posts throughout the rest for the fences for the units and things like that. And so we thought that would need a separate motion prior to approving the site plan.
Okay. Got it. All right.
So like I said, I can read that motion in if the commission so chooses later on.
Okay.
But staff recommends the planning commission, based on the exhibits submitted, the applicant's testimony, and the staff report findings recommendation, grant SP-7868-2018 final site plan approval, finding conformance with sections 24-170 and 24-171 of the city zoning ordinance, with currently 12 conditions.
Now, what I'm reading is that condition 10, with the change of the design guidelines, goes away, right?
No, it would stay. We would just modify condition 10 and remove the first portion of it. We still need to receive approval from the city manager for the height of the fence. That is in the design guidelines as well. And we still want to see something from the applicant's noise consultant, that the sound wall is still accurate from the SDP stage.
Got it. Okay. All right. Commissioners, thoughts, concerns? Anybody?
I'm gonna go back to what Sally was talking about on that little corner lot, the entry to alley lot. That I think on the design guidelines, we missed a key lot. So that should have been a key lot.
Lot 24.
It should have been an alley entrance key lot. Yeah, it's page 8 in the guidelines. On the packet, it's 290. Wow.
It is a key lot.
It is.
Huh?
Yeah, it is labeled as an alley key lot.
Oh, okay. The rendering didn't get it. All right, sorry. I'm looking at the other exhibit in the design guidelines. So the plan got it. Not the guidelines. That's great.
All right, good. All right, anything else?
No.
I mean, we'll frame it up this way. I think there was a fair amount of good work done to get the SDP ready and to establish the terms and the basic planning principles and, of course, the design guidelines. So, interestingly enough, this plan seems to follow right along with that. So it's not looking like it varies by much a penny from what everybody has seen before, so that looks good. I am a little disappointed not bringing architecture tonight because I think that's what buttons up our initial assumptions about the density, the arrangement of the lots, the build-tos. You know, I know the guidelines set out the expectations, but it's always about seeing it in its final execution that means something. But I also understand that it's not likely to change or even put much pressure on the existing infrastructure patterns since the preliminary subdivision was already established through the SDP. So that's a roundabout way of saying I'm disappointed, but I'm also relatively well assured that it's not going to fundamentally change the assumptions or the basic approach to planning the neighborhood. So that's a good thing.
Yeah, that's great.
I do think up in that upper left corner, this issue about the build-to line and the landscaping, it's always been a concern. And you know, you can stomp your foot and put down your fist and say, we established the build-to line. I'd like to think you'll work with us to figure out a way to really do a good job with that buffer, because it's going to impact the architecture somehow, or at least ultimately what you can do with that, the extension of the homes themselves. I think you were calling it a sunroom or something. So you know, that's on the record, and I'm hoping you'll come back with a good solution for that.
And I'll make two small suggestions too, to say that you know, if a fence, and I'd encourage you to talk to the neighbor, talk to your immediate neighbor, very immediate neighbor, and see if the fence is agreed on, if everybody agreed on what kind of fence it is, color, whatever. And that may be quite literally phase 1, right? So if that fence goes up and then you start construction, that may help their livability and really safety, but their livability, that it's not just a construction fence, it's actually it's the final fence, and then you can start building beyond that. You know, I can't think of what the practical concern with that would be, other than accidentally knocking it down, but that would kind of make the point, right? So I think, and then the other one is the sort of this incompatible giant 8-foot fence. It's true, right? It's a different thing. So as you're driving along, it's suburban, and an 8-foot fence, right? And although there's a jumble of architectural items in there, commercial, gas stations, the school, all this kind of weird stuff. So it's not an overly consistent street anyway. But so I think the only tool that you have is planting. And right now we're proposing trees, you know, flowering trees and taller, you know, seasonal trees. And I think somewhere in there may be the ability to throw something in a lower plane that's evergreen or something like that. That same kind of all-season piece, just to soften that wall. Because 8 feet's a monster wall. I mean, I don't think it's a detriment.
No, I'm with you, but I'm wondering, like, if there could be a turn and something that brings the height down at the end. towards the end as you move farther into 28. So, you know, beyond the primary concern of mitigating the noise, just sort of bring it down in a more graceful manner than just wall, not wall.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, it might be, you know, well, I want to, let me revisit, I'm almost at a point where I would like to suggest a condition, or let me discuss this and we'll see where it goes. Something about phasing the landscape buffer and fence, if that's what it comes to, but something about the applicant working with staff in cooperation with the neighbors to phase the fence and the landscape buffer, you know, ahead of the construction, something like that. I don't know what that sounds like in your practice of these kinds of things, but it would, I think that's an important enough point that Matt made about getting ahead of whatever impact there is and using this as the...
As it relates to the adjacent lot on the north
Adjacent
side.
lots, yeah.
Yes, I'm with you.
Yeah. So Greg, does that make sense? I'm sort of stumbling through it a bit.
Yeah, I think so.
And I'd recommend we make it a condition so everybody really comes to terms with what that looks like and how it performs and what it is, and then you move on from there.
There's a million subtle things which Louise knows all too well. You know, just setting board back and then setting board forward. The same fence, but you get a shadow line that runs at different stages, so it looks more checkerboard rather than straight. There's a million little tricks to breaking up that big fence, and then.
Does it have to be a solid fence? Could it be a berm with a fence on top of the berm?
Okay, I think we're talking about two different
So
things.
the adjacent neighbor, so mitigating.
I don't think
whatever-
there's room next to the neighbor to do a berm.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
Oh,
that's what-
There's not room up front
I'm
either,
sorry, I
yeah.
missed
He's
that.
talking up
But-
front, we're
I'm
talking
sorry.
to.
But the same
No.
comment applies. There's not room in the front either.
But
That
let
was
me
my
be
first
clear,
thought, too, but it
I'm
doesn't.
really talking about the adjacent, the issues of buffers with the adjacent neighborhood.
Gotcha.
Work through that, come up with that in an early phase, and phase the plan for installing that at a reasonably early in the process. I know it may be, you know, if you got to back a truck in through that to make the road connection, you certainly don't want this to be in your way, but do it in a way that gets ahead of the rest of the development. Okay, that's the first.
So this is for the lots adjoining Lot 27 on
Yeah.
Nursery Lane. Yeah.
And you're suggesting to work out that phasing plan with staff?
And
You mean
with
18 and
the
17?
cooperation of the neighborhood, the neighbors. So
It's
that- so
one
that
neighbor,
input
one
from-
neighbor.
There's two there, right, yeah.
Yeah, just one.
Whatever,
That's like pipe to them lot doesn't have a house at the end of it.
No, but
That's further down.
okay, well, whoever's impacted, but just make it known that you're working through that in an early phase. And
Just to
For the two
clarify,
lots on the northwest
They
side.
already have a 6-foot wood fence, at least that's what's
so
shown
then
on
the
this.
solution might be landscaping.
Yes.
I don't want to solve it tonight.
Right.
What I'm suggesting is that the buffer, whatever it needs to be and within reason, is established in an early phase, so it doesn't turn out to be, oh, we sold that lot with a 30-foot sunroom in the back, we've got nowhere to do this landscaping buffer. That's what I don't want to hear.
so
For the
just
two northwest lots?
Yeah,
Okay.
So there's those two lots, 17 and 18.
I think so. I think that's essentially the adjacency that's most sensitive.
I mean, it says 27,
Oh.
right? That's-
Well, Lot
Wait.
27 is the neighboring lot.
Oh, I got you.
Yeah,
All
we're
right,
talking
great.
about
Lot-
this.
Yeah, that's
Our
fair.
our lot, 18, 17.
You know how to
Right.
identify it. Okay, then the second point, this issue with the sound wall on 28, I think, to be kind of blunt about it, that's something that should have been on the adjacent neighborhood too. They just didn't get it because houses that back up that close to the now expanded or widened 28 are awfully close to some of the traffic noise and other things. So I think this is a good amenity, and I think the recommendation is that from a design perspective, now this is not a phasing or necessarily even a placement, but when you transition from the masonry solution that's around the main entrance, which is a kind of a higher quality, you know, stronger statement, to just the fence on the opposite side, I guess the eastern side, what doesn't happen is at the very end of that there is a rich and high quality way to terminate that, and we don't want to solve it tonight, but it just sort of runs out and stops. It looks like whatever it is, and so whether that's turning it back and creating another landscape cluster or a masonry detail, do something with staff, work with them to kind of figure out what that detail is in a reasonable way to terminate it, that it doesn't look strange coming up from essentially the east.
One of the reasons why there may not have been a sound wall is because those houses are probably another, a good 100 feet back from the road.
Fair enough,
So-
fair enough. But what I'm getting is, I think the sound wall the fence or the wall is an appropriate mitigation to the homes that are that close to 28. So I'm not arguing that. I think the whole issue is how it's designed to really transition back into the adjacent commercial use and doesn't look like it's just got squeezed out of a fence extractor and cut off,
Frankly, I think in both directions.
It actually makes a turn.
It does turn towards the residential portion.
Towards the residential
The masonry wall
portion.
doesn't just end at the property line, it actually does turn and convert to a Trex wall and then goes back into the residential neighborhood.
The masonry side does.
Yes, you can see it here. It terminates here, the termination of the Trex, or the masonry wall, I'm sorry, turns to Trex and then continues back to about this point here.
At 8 feet.
This one's at 6 feet.
Okay.
The Trex fence on the right side along the front edge is at 7 feet. Again, that's the guidance from the.
So look at the right, head to the other direction, to the other corner where your
corner.
That one turns as well, yeah. If I can find it, I'm sorry.
It turns at 45.
And then turns up.
Okay. So maybe the landscape needs to kind of be worked out there a little bit, and
But that's good.
That's better. But that was just the point that was brought up is to make sure that has a reasonable termination. All right. Anything else you want to? So I put on the table the idea of a 13th condition, right?
13th condition.
Yeah. Greg, do you have that for the record now?
13 conditions.
Yeah, I think we'll do applicant to phase fence and landscape buffer for lots 17 and 18 prior to construction.
I think it's a work with staff first to be sure we're getting a buffer.
But we do have a condition already about that landscape buffer for those two lots.
I think it's
So
more
if you're looking for
the
just more of a
issue.
condition, I guess just to ensure that happens before the construction, I think the
We can
condition
add
should
it to
be
that
that they
condition.
requires them to do that before, then
Okay.
instead of working with staff.
Let's leave the work with staff because we want to make sure it works.
Okay.
But we have a concern.
Well, I think we need to sequence it with the construction work we have to do.
Right.
I think we run the risk of installing something that we just need to rip out when we're doing grading. So it's got to be a reasonable sequencing.
That's why I want you to work with staff.
Okay,
I understand
we're happy
that.
to work with staff.
I understand that, yeah.
Okay. But as long as the condition doesn't say everything has to be installed first thing in the
Work with
process,
staff.
we'll work with staff on the
Makes-
process.
Whatever is the
Work
smartest
with
thing.
staff
Right.
gives you
And
flexibility.
that it gives the buffer we're
Right.
really expecting to see there.
Right.
Understood. I think the danger is a landscape plan has lots of nice little overlapping circles, but then when you show up, it's a couple of nandinas and some mulch, and that's really not much of a buffer.
All right, we're happy to work with staff on that.
So I'll revise that, I'm applicant to work with staff to phase fence and landscape buffer prior to issuance of any permits.
Yeah.
For
For
lots
sorry, for lots
17
17 and 18, yes,
Yeah.
sorry.
All right, good. Thank you. And that just now gets folded into the other condition?
Well, I think it's
separate?
We'll keep it as a separate condition.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's 13.
Lucky 13.
Very good. Any other comments, questions, concerns?
Not for me.
Good, all right.
And just to confirm, the commission is okay with the Trex posts?
Yes.
Yes.
And so what's that?
Well, we're gonna say composite, right?
Composite.
Yes,
Yeah,
the composite
generic,
post.
right.
Yeah.
Composite wood
It's like
post,
Xerox.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Composite.
as opposed to Trex.
Don't write tracks.
composite.
So the first motion you need is to update the design guidelines for composite wood posts?
Yes, for the sound
So
wall.
that recommendation from staff would be staff recommends the planning commission based on the exhibits submitted to staff report, staff findings, the applicant's testimony, staff recommendation, grant a
Okay, right.
modification. Sorry, grant a modification to the approved design guidelines to permit composite noise fence posts
For the sound
for
wall.
the sound wall.
Okay, so, go ahead.
So moved.
Second.
All right, so moved and seconded to update the design guidelines to include composite wood posts. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So the composite wood posts are now part of the guidelines. That passes unanimously. Now let's get to the recommendation on the main plan. We've got 13 conditions, right?
We have 13 conditions with a modification to the 10th condition.
Okay.
So the 10th condition will now read applicant to receive final approval for the noise wall height and receive confirmation from the applicant's noise consultant provided noise analysis complies with the city's regulations prior to the issuance of any permits.
Okay.
Okay.
And then 12 and 13, we've already read into the record, but I can read
Right.
it again if you.
No, it's in the record as well.
It's in the record.
Okay.
Cool.
Now, before we do this, the applicant's attorney is still at the lectern. Is there an issue? Do we need to hear from you before we do
No,
this?
but we are going to talk about the forest conservation plan conditions, right?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. All right, so is there a motion, please, on the main site plan proposal?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the planning commission, based on the exhibits submitted, the applicant's testimony, and the staff reports, findings, and recommendations, and our discussion this evening, grant SP-7868-2018 final site plan approval, finding it in compliance with sections 24-170 and 24-171 of the city zoning ordinance with the 13 conditions that were identified this evening.
Second.
Seconded, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstains? Okay, passes unanimously, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get into the forest conservation.
So the forest conservation, and we have a modified condition number 1, and that will now read applicant to submit to staff revised final forest conservation plans to reflect tree protection measures for off-street trees that are identified as potentially being impacted by proposed grading prior to issuance of any permits.
Okay, and the second one restates.
The second one will be the
states.
one that's in the staff report, but that one reads of any off-site tree, oh, sorry, that's the old one. Applicant is to submit revised final forest conservation plans to address minor labeling and editing errors to be approved by staff prior to signature of the plans and issuance of any permits.
Okay, so did you have something on this?
We proposed those conditions.
Okay,
Oh, okay.
so that's all?
So we
You wanted credit for the.
So we second that. No, so we're in agreement with those conditions.
Okay, thank you. But let the record show.
He was
Mr.
Yeah.
It's
All
our
right.
staff recommendation, that is the staff recommends the planning commission based on the exhibits submitted to staff report, staff findings, applicant's testimony, and staff recommendation, grant ENV 7871-2018 final forest conservation plan approval, finding in compliance with chapter 22 of the code with 2 conditions.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
It's moved and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously. All right, does that wrap us up on? All right, good luck.
Great.
Good luck.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for all your work
Appreciate
on
all
this.
the time. Thank you.
So Jim,
Thank
is it
you.
harder to work with an award-winning landscape architect as the developer, or?
Yeah.
Easier
For the record, we don't do an Indiana.
Well, good. That thing is a weed. All right. Yeah, so as an aside, this is not related to this application, but I am curious, not for
Thank you.
Thank you.
Maybe Greg or Trudy, there was some discussion about work going on at the intersection, the signalized intersection from the high school traffic, right? Is that?
Work going on right now.
No, just people were asking, was there, is there anything being done to address traffic around the high school, and whether that's part of the city's purview at all?
They actually discussed it at the transportation committee, and the consensus was that it would be up to the state to be doing that.
Yeah, okay.
Because it didn't show, in their traffic study, it didn't show a specific need related to this plan for that.
Yeah, okay. So anything that happens because it's school generated or anything else, that's on an entirely different track, or entirely, you have to take somebody else to bring that forward, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. All right, very good. Well, with that, we are then going to from the commission, so Lloyd, can I start with you tonight?
So you're going to talk about the July 23rd, I think it is, or 17th rather?
Yeah.
About, okay, so I won't say anything further. I have nothing else to say.
Okay.
But please do.
No, go right ahead.
Anything?
I just signed the official contract to have the Planning Commission, the Maryland Planning Commission Association's conference here in Gaithersburg in October, and I want all of my Planning
Fantastic.
Commissioner cohorts to be there.
Where will that be?
It's going to be at the Holiday Inn,
Excellent.
and then, of course, more information forthcoming.
Excellent.
What was the week, Danny? It's October 25th and 26th.
Thursday and Friday.
Yeah,
That's great.
mark your calendars.
All right.
I'd also like to congratulate Commissioner Winborn on his appointment again, reappointment.
Thank you.
And
Commissioner. Right.
Commissioner Hopkins.
Okay, Commissioner Hopkins for
Yeah.
5 more years? 5 more years? God, that's a
5
lot.
more years?
5 more
You
years.
didn't think about that, huh?
Pithy, witty, and insightful commentary.
Yeah. Clearly, Danny and Eric are starting to get punchier and punchier, so let's see what
All
happens.
right, we'll put it back.
It's like an old married couple here.
Yeah, it's gonna get funnier and funnier.
Wow. For continuing.
Ratings will go up.
Yeah, there you go. Instead of 2, it'll be 3.
Ratings. Anything else, Danny?
That's it. Thank you very much.
Matt?
Nothing for me.
All right, Ms. Sally?
Well, thanks for the site work, Lloyd. We do have a very exciting presentation coming up on July 17. Diro Tadani, who's a renowned urbanist, will be speaking at the lecture series, which is a partnership of the Kenlas Community Foundation and the City Planning and Department. So I encourage all of you to mark your calendars. 7, we begin with a wine reception at 7 and 7:30 with the lecture.
Outstanding. Cool. All right, so from the staff, we have one item tonight that's actually on the agenda about the planning report, right? Jasmine, that's you? Okay.
So you know, every year, staff puts together the annual planning report that's required by the state. So in your packet was the long form that Kurt Eby had put together. So tonight we just need your approval tonight and John's signature on the letter so we can get that sent. And we'll be presenting the illustrative document on the July 5th Planning Commission.
Okay, great. All right, any questions? I thumbed through it. I looked for all the kind of the highlights. It seemed to be a great job. So tell Kirk, good work. I know it's a job to shovel through some of the required paperwork, but you guys do a good job with it. So
It's a fun reminder of just everything that's happened. So it's
it's nice you get to check yes to so many things, right? So,
Exactly.
Yeah. All right. Any questions about that? Do you need a motion to approve it, or what do you need?
Oh, no. Do we need a motion?
Just a nod.
Record reflecting consensus for approval is fine, or if you want to do a motion, either one.
That sounds good. We got to do that. Use that more often.
Let our record reflect consensus.
So moved.
Okay, good,
So moved.
We've got it both.
Okay, very good. What's next? Trudy?
The next gathering of the Planning Commission is Monday, July 2nd for a joint public hearing on a text amendment concerning CBD and auto uses in that zone. And right now I have Matt Hopkins is tentative.
I think I'm in.
Okay, and Rosali,
I'm in.
You're in, okay.
I'm in.
So I think we have everyone.
I'm in.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Okay.
and then
July 5th.
on our next planning commission meeting is on a Thursday, July 5th. So that's a different night, but same channel. And Rosali is out and.
No, I will be in.
You're here? Okay.
Is there still a joint meeting on July 9th?
Yes, I'm getting.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Just look at my calendar.
So Danny, are you available that night?
On
I'm
the
sorry,
5th?
Miriam didn't have a chance to
I'm
update this
tentative.
before. You're tentative?
I'm tentative. I'll let
Okay.
you know.
Okay. And then there's a joint work session on the survey results from the CD zone survey
Okay.
on Monday, July 9th. There is one item before that on the agenda, but then the joint work session is after that.
Okay.
And Rosali, you are out for that one. And Danny, you're tentative for that
Tentative,
also.
right.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Good. All right, Greg? Anything?
Nothing for me
No,
tonight.
not tonight. All right. Anybody else? Well, if not, have a good evening. We're adjourned.